Chapter 541, Epilogue 4, The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint 6. They immediately took Kim Dakya back to their headquarters located in Gwangwamon. Aileen was summoned, and they even requested aid from the constellations with expertise in medicine, such as Guam Divine Doctor. Their plan was perfect. With this plan, they couldn't have failed. They even called upon every fable expert scattered throughout the world, too. This plan was the one where they couldn't afford to fail. For the period of over a week, dozens of famed doctors were brought in to treat Kim Dakya. It was to collect the remaining fables somehow and restore his soul form. There is nothing that can be done currently. YCLHWA worked throughout the night and as a result, passed out. A Russian expert subbing for her afterwards said these words. "We can't say he's dead, but we also can't say that he's alive either. This child will never wake up again, that's why." But that couldn't be. They worked tirelessly and finally managed to come this far, so this story simply couldn't end like this. The one to stay as the pillar of support for the crumbling companions was Yu Sanga. The problem is with Dakya Sc's soul, yes. In that case, they only needed to restore his soul then. So the companions sought out the assistance of the constellation, most well-versed in everything soul-related. This child's soul didn't come to the underworld. No, his soul didn't go to any of the afterlives found in the other world views. The queen of the underworld, Persephone, could only stroke Kim Dakya's forehead with a sorrowful expression. This was this child's choice. His choice. Please don't make me laugh. You also saw it too, didn't you? Back in that subway, we all saw the fables Dakya SSI possessed, didn't we? He wanted to be with us, he wanted us to save her. There are countless fables within a person's soul. The words we saw were simply a small part of that. Don't say something like that as if it means nothing. Jiang Huiwen shouted out. There was no other way for her to endure except to shout. It was his choice. This was Kim Dakya's choice. The companions didn't give up. Even the collecting of fables, even the recovery of his soul, they were impossible. In that case, only one method remained. I was waiting for you. The master of the Isle of Reincarnators, Sakyamuni, welcomed them with a benevolent smile, as if he knew they would come here. It's truly lamentable, but he's not someone this one can reincarnate. A portion of his soul still remains. We can divide and share the fables we all possess, just like how I did it back then if we utilize the powers of samsara. Ah, my dear Arhat, I understand your sorrow, I do. However, he can't be reincarnated. Sakyamuni looked at Yu Sanga with a regretful expression before letting a soft sigh escape from his lips. Soon, a truly countless number of threads began floating up before his eyes that observed Kim Dakya quietly slumbering away. There were so many of these red threads that counting them all was impossible. Yu Sanga too could see them. The threads of fate. The threads stretched out to the night sky and eventually even pierced through star stream itself. Yu Sanga stared at them and realized why Kim Dakya couldn't be reincarnated. I see. She didn't want to acknowledge it. Even then, the truth didn't change. His soul, it has already reincarnated in another world line. Sakyamuni nodded his head. More correctly, we should say his souls. In front of everyone, Han Suyong passed on the things she'd been told. Kim Dakya's soul has been scattered throughout the whole universe. The memories from the moments when she faced off against the fourth wall, inside the darkened room, she didn't leave a single word out and repeated every part of that conversation to her companions. Someone fell down, some despaired. Yijai cried out, "Let's go find that guy again. The fourth wall might know a way, right? We might be able to recover Dakya Ajasi's soul somehow." If you do that, then what about Kim Dakjas reincarnating in other worlds? They must be living their own lives, won't they? That is. Yijai, panting like a bull, gulped down a glass of water on the table before carrying on. There must be some other way. Whatever that thing was, the fourth wall or whatever, you said it knows something. We don't have any methods to meet that guy again. We used up all of our fragments when opening the wall. Another 4 days flew by in an instant. The companions had become utterly devastated, ravaged, some missed their meals, while some didn't even bother to sleep. How long passed by like that? Jiang Huiwan sought out Yu Yonghyuk. Yonghyuk SSI. Yu Yonghyuk, polishing his dark, heavenly demon sword, out of an old habit raised his head. He frowned slightly as if the sunlight stung, before shifting his gaze back to the sword. No matter how much he polished it, the dark stain on the blade didn't want to come off. The stain came from Kim Dokya's letters that he cut down. He quietly stared at the stain, before finally opening his mouth. 4 days is quite fast for making up your mind. That's because we don't have any other choice. Yu Yonghyuk's emotionless eyes locked on to Jiang Huiwan. Despite experiencing so many tragedies until now, her eyes still burned vigorously. He too used to have such eyes, once upon a time. We can do this, we've already done it twice, that's why, Jiang Huiwan shouted. Yu Yonghyuk used to think that. Their plan was like a well-constructed fantasy. They believed that they can pull it off this time, that they should be able to see the conclusion they wanted. Even if this world ends in tragedy, don't think that you've all failed. Did that fool feel this way back then? Yu Yonghyuk spoke up. Right, we did do it. Please, let's try it one more time. We can definitely pull it off this time. We can definitely save Dokya SSI. Do not think that things will turn out better than this turn, just because you went back in time. After spitting out those words reflexively, Yu Yonghyuk stopped breathing for a little while. Why are you saying such things? This turn was a definite improvement, wasn't it? We can definitely do better. It's impossible. Why not when we haven't even tried it? Yu Yonghyuk didn't reply. Her expression grew deeply incensed. Her hand then gripped the sword, implying that she'd not hesitate to cut him down if he didn't cooperate immediately. Even then, even under her intense threat, he didn't budge an inch. Seeing him act like this, something else slowly floated up on her expression. You can't be. Yu Yonghyuk still didn't reply. Jiang Huiwan began urging him in sheer disbelief. Is it true, is it? He finally replied, while staring at his own attribute window floating before his eyes. I'm no longer the regressor. The category of regressor no longer existed among his attributes. His stigmata had vanished, too, both regression and group regression. He didn't possess any stigma to turn back the clock. Winds began blowing in from somewhere. While letting the winds hit him, Yu Yonghyuk looked up at the clear skies of Starstream. He couldn't sense the gaze he used to feel all the time. No matter how much he sharpened his perception, he simply couldn't locate it like before. He was no longer the protagonist of the story. His story came to an end when the lone reader went away. Along with his final regression, too. We can cross over to another world line. And then someone said something like that. It doesn't really have to be a regression, does it? We cross the world line and enter the location of a different scenario. We then gather the fragments of final wall one more time and meet the fourth wall. It was a crazy plan. What made it even crazier was the fact that the person suggesting it was none other than the usually composed Yu Sangha. Han Suyong replied, that guy might not even help us. Even still, we need to try. It's better than not trying, right? They had already done it once before. No reason not to try it again. But why was this? Han Suyong didn't believe that this was the right way to go. What would happen to them if they failed this time, too? Wouldn't they try to skip over the world line again? And just like that, they would cross the world lines again, and again. By continuing that, they might end up no different from the 999th turn. Outer gods. Their lives might get damaged beyond repair. The truly wretched thing was, despite knowing the truth, she couldn't fight against the temptation. How will you cross the world line anyway? We can't regress anymore, remember. And we don't even have the secretive plotter to help us in this place either. Have you forgotten? This world line is different from the 1864th turn. It was at that moment a certain thought brushed past Han Suyong's mind. There was one more method. Accompanied by the thunderous kugugugu noise, a gigantic shadow was cast upon Gwangwamun right then. It came from a massive flying object large enough to completely blanket the main street and then some. Phew fu fu, long time no see everyone. Bihyung was riding on that flying object. He had become the Dakibai king of this world after the bureau was completely ruined, and it seemed that this ruined world was exactly to his liking. Right, so you need this thing, is that it? That was the item only found in the last scenario. The final arc. Han Suyong slowly approached the arc. Without a doubt, using this would allow them to jump the world line. Well, Dakibus and constellations of the very last scenario were also planning to escape to another world line using this vessel, after all. Yu Sangha spoke up. However, if we use this, we'll end up being no different to Dakibus. You should have raised such points before we used the group regression, you know. Han Suyong reached the arc. That prompted Bihyung to issue a warning. Let me make this crystal clear. This arc is a lot older than it looks, so it can be used only once. Doesn't matter. Being able to travel to another world line implied that they could use this arc in a similar capacity as Yu Yonghyok's own regression. What if they could move to another world line specific point in history? If they could do something like that, then they might be able to change world lines in a far more efficient, effective manner than Yu Yonghyok's regression. Han Suyong hurriedly shouted out, Bihyung, the world line we want to go to is. However, even before she could finish, a message came to her first. It's impossible to set sail to the applicable world line. Bihyung's expression became confused. What's gotten into it? I don't think it has ever said something like this before. What's wrong? Is it broken? Call out a different world line. Han Suyong spoke up again. That resulted in yet another message. It's impossible to set sail to the applicable world line. She repeatedly mentioned other world lines. She spoke, then spoke again. However, the message floating up remained the same. It's impossible to set sail to the applicable world line. It's impossible to set sail to the applicable world line. It's impossible to set sail to the applicable world line. Utterly flustered now, Bihyung began muttering out. Passageways to all those world lines have been closed off. It means the possibilities that used to be open between the world lines have completely shut down. We can't go. Looks that way. Can something like this even happen? All the world lines related to the ways of survival, the ones she could remember, were blocked off. Does that mean we can't go anywhere? No, there is one. Really, which one? But it's a world line with all the scenarios already concluded. Bihyung displayed the entered route. Surprisingly enough, the destination was a location they all knew quite intimately. Yu Yonghyok's 1864th regression turn. The planetary system number 8612, where all the scenarios had already ended. It was Earth, the one they left from. Epilogue 4, The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint 6 Fin. Chapter 542, Epilogue 4, The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint 7. The ending to the 1865th regression turn was more perfect than any other world lines. A month flew by after the conclusion of the final scenario. The damages suffered from the scenarios were quickly repaired, and through the help of the regressors, various nations regained their law and order quite quickly. Schools opened their doors again, and workers started going back to their old jobs. The streets were filled to the brim with slogans welcoming the brand new world. Yijai, standing on this alien-feeling street, stared at an athletics field across the fence. That's your friend, isn't she? Jiang Huiwen asked, and Yijai nodded her head. The latter's friend was currently running on the track. Her name was Naborai, a friend that she had to kill with her own hands, and that very person was alive and well in this world line. She was alive, she was breathing, and her legs were moving. Jai-ya, you don't have to go back. Yijai's eyes continued to chase after Borai's back, the friend she missed so much. the friend that appeared in the nightmares she always suffered from. She thought that rescuing Bo-Rai would bring her nightmares to an end. Unfortunately, memories couldn't be so easily exorcised like that. No, her nightmare returned with vengeance in a far more vivid form. Within it, she'd live the same scenario many, many times over and murder the dream version of Bo-Rai. Every time that happened, she'd come to realize something over and over again. The one she rescued this time wasn't the dead Bo-Rai. That the one she saved was simply another Bo-Rai from another world line. That was all. Jai-Hai Yao. Yi-Jai-Hai stared at the athletics field for a long time before making her reply. We made a promise with Biyu, after all. We did promise that we will definitely cross the world lines again and return home. Jiang Huiwen quietly studied Yi-Jai-Hai's face while the girl said that, then placed her hand on the latter's shoulder. I'm sure it will get lonely once we return. Things that exist here don't on the other side, after all. Yi-Jai-Hai smiled. She used the hand that wiped away at her eyes and pointed to her head. I won't be lonely, because they are all in here. Her voice trembled as she said that. Was it fine to say something like that? If she could really say something like that, then why did they even bother to come to this place, to begin with? Let's go. This Iani will treat you to something tasty today. Oriboni. Whenever Yu Mia used that term, there would be something she wanted to ask him for. Yu Younghyuk knew that after going through many regressions, she quietly stared her older brother before opening her mouth. Oriboni, you did your very best. No one can do more or better than what you have already done. His eyelids were solemnly lowered. Yu Mia climbed up on a chair and placed her hand on the crown of his head. Let's stop and go back home. The scenario of tragedy they had to live through. The world was enveloped in the acrid smoke of the apocalypse's cannons, and they had lost their precious ones. The lyrics of a song coming from somewhere caused Han Soo-young to frown quite heavily. Is this a funeral dirge or something? No, it's actually a trending song these days, a story that exalts you and your group. The cackling Bihyung opened the door to the ark. The vessel, with its fable energy fully recharged, greeted them. One by one, regressors who chose to return home climbed aboard the vessel. Not everyone chose to do so, however, some decided to remain. Such as Gong Pildu, unable to say anything while sweating profusely. Behind him, young children could be seen. Han Soo-young knew why he regressed in the first place. You should remain here. Someone needs to stay and protect this place after all, said Han Soo-young. Gong Pildu didn't reply to her. Anyone else wanting to stay behind? Han Soo-young calmly raised her voice. You should give it some serious thought, okay? If you leave, then your parents, lovers, friends, etc., you will never get to see them ever again. Will you be fine with that? So, think it over. Shin Yuseung then grabbed Han Soo-young's hand tightly. This isn't our world line, you know. Dakya Ajasi will probably think that way too. The majority of Kim Dakya Company, incarnations and constellations chose to return. In the middle of them all was young Kim Dakya lying on the stretcher, unmoving. Oh, my dear Persephone, are you really planning to leave me? Han Soo-young could only smile wryly after witnessing Hades, unable to mop around any longer, started his desperate song and dance to appeal to his dearly beloved. Was Hades's personality originally like that? Persephone directed her troubled smile at such Hades. I'm truly sorry, Hades, but I'm not the Persephone you used to know. You're undoubtedly Persephone, the queen of the darkest spring and the underworld. Persephone softly shook her head. If you insist on doing this, I shall go with you. This is your world line, dear, and you're also the king of the underworld too. Please, don't forget your dignity. But my world is you, Persephone. Bihyung shook his head helplessly, and then asked Han Soo-young, I'm sure there's no point in me asking, but hey, are you really leaving? If you stay, you know you will be treated like a king for the rest of your life. I didn't come to this world line for that purpose. Han Soo-young looked at the young Kim Dakya lying on the stretcher. For the last few months, Han Soo-young and her colleagues immersed themselves in scouring the entirety of Starstream to find a way to revive Kim Dok-ya. However, they couldn't locate anything like that. The best they could do was to keep his life going like this, not dead but not alive either. Bae-hyung, as a goodbye present, why don't you share a bit of the Bureau's fable with us? The Bureau's fable. The system in our world line is destroyed, you see. We don't know what might happen, so give us a little bit, okay? Bae-hyung pouted with a very unhappy face, but eventually handed down a portion of the fable to Han Soo-young. It was then a man dashed towards them from afar while kicking up a storm of dust clouds. A big man with unkempt bushy beard on his face, as a matter of fact. It was Yi Hyun-seong. "Hurry and start the engines," he shouted out. When they took a closer look, military vehicles could be seen angrily chasing after him. "Now that I think about it, he's still a wanted man, isn't he?" Han Soo-young wryly chuckled and gave her signal. That prompted Yoo Young-hyuk to open his mouth. "We're departing." At last, the final arc was taking to the skis. The heroes of Kim Dok-ya Company are now setting off on their journey. People were looking up at them. Helicopters from TV stations gathered around and broadcast their departure. Reporters shouted as the cameras zoomed in closer to the companions' faces. "Why are you all crying? You have managed to save this world line." The view of the ground progressively grew further away. Someone among them muttered out, "What did we come here for, I wonder?" Like an episode of a horrible nightmare, the world below was growing distant. It was becoming memories, a past that couldn't be turned back. Han Soo-young muttered out, "What do you mean, why?" As the arc accelerated, the surrounding view changed. The galaxies of the world line streamed past them quickly, and Kim Dok-ya, having reincarnated, must have been living his life in a distant world line somewhere. When Han Soo-young thought like that, she felt this really powerful urge. What if she tried to forcibly change the route, even if it was now? What would happen if they embarked on a journey to meet Kim Dok-ya's reincarnated form somewhere within those distant stars? If she did, if they could do it then. However, was that what Kim Dok-ya really wanted? The ark's window reflected the faces of Yoo Young-hyuk and Yoo Sang-ah walking up next to her almost at the same time. They too carried the exact same expression as hers, staring at the exact same view as her. The moment she saw their faces, she realized something. She realized that they were thinking the same thing as her, and that was why that plan could never come to reality. It was then the ark started thumping and clonking next. The vessel has entered a new world line. Already, isn't this way too? As if it was entering the atmosphere, the ark began to suddenly nosedive. It felt as if gravity itself had disappeared for a second there, but then the vessel's hull slammed into something with a loud, explosive noise. The light within the interior went out from a moment before coming back on. The vessel has reached the destination. Han Soo-young held her pulsing head and scanned her companions. "Damn it, never mind being old, it's a bloody antique, this thing. Is everyone all right?" "I'm fine, what about the others?" Thankfully, no one was hurt. Han Soo-young manipulated the hull and opened up an exit. The door slowly opened, and a flight of stairs extended below it. She cautiously walked down the steps, and the moment her feet touched the ground, someone's voice resounded out. "Who are you people?" What was going on here? Fully armed soldiers were pointing their guns at her and the group. Yi Hyun-seong, jumping up in fright, hurriedly hid behind her. "Soo-young SSI, what's going on here? Even here they can't be trying to arrest me." "Of course that's not possible. This is our home after all," said Han Soo-young. She shoved Yi Hyun-seong back and then addressed the soldiers. "Hey, don't you think your welcoming party to celebrate our return is a bit too rough? Don't you know who I am?" The guns hurriedly took aim at her as she strode forward like a neighborhood thug. "I'm warning you. You pull the trigger on that thing, then all of you will." It was then Han Soo-young's eyes caught the face of a certain someone. It was a middle-aged woman's face, setting off this vague déjà vu as if she could just about recognize it. The blonde locks were tumbling down to the woman's shoulders, and her crimson eye was swirling in a red vortex. the owner of that eye addressed her. Han Soo-young. Han Soo-young dazedly stared at the blonde woman. That voice. Some time had passed by, but she could never forget it. The middle-aged woman issued the order to stand down with the flick of her hand. Han Soo-young, is it really you? When she heard that voice again, Han Soo-young felt something welling up inside her. While slowly descending to the ground, she kept staring back at Anna Croft. She didn't know where to start asking her questions, so she asked whatever jumped out of her mouth first. How many years has it been since we left? It's been 20 years. Han Soo-young's trembling lips swallowed those years down. She felt dizzy. Who would have believed now that the horrifying scenarios had ever taken place in this world? The city of Seoul was no longer the place she remembered. No, this city was as complete as the one from the 1865th turn, the one she thought was pretty much perfect. The deep greenery of the trees lining the streets, and children dribbling balls around in the distant playground far away. 20 years. So that's what it was. In a world where we don't exist, you have managed to carry on. And that's how you got to change the world to this extent. Han Soo-young. The startled Anna Croft quickly offered support as Han Soo-young wobbled unsteadily. This was an embrace from a person she didn't even like, yet Han Soo-young clung onto those shoulders and broke down in tears. At last, they had returned to the 1864th turn. The world where they completed the scenarios for the first time. Some managed to return, while some couldn't. Some things had to remain as the past that nothing could change. She saw the site of the industrial complex, spreading out in the far distance. Kim Dok-ya's fatting bronze statue stood before it. Next to his figure, assuming a slightly awkward pose, was a massive statue of a squid. To commemorate Kim Dok-ya's return. While looking at that bizarre monstrosity of a squid, Han Soo-young alternated between breathless sobbing and hysterical laughter. She didn't want to admit it. If she insisted on it, then she felt that something somewhere might change somehow. But right now, right in this moment, she simply had to admit to it. Their plan was a failure. And this place, it was the conclusion to the world they had found. 2 years went by since the companions' return. 2 years were a longer stretch of time than one might imagine, and perhaps fittingly, several incidents happened during then. Such as Yi Hyun-seong and Jeong Hui-won leaving the complex, or Shin Yu-seung and Yi Gil-yong entering high school, Yi Jae-hai getting slapped with an F during the first midterms, etc., etc. When all these many incidents were to be summarized, it'd be like the following. Kim Dok-ya Company had been disbanded. Epilogue 4, The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint 7 Fin. Chapter 543, Epilogue 4, The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint 8. As if fulfilling a promise, the companions went on their separate ways to find their purpose. Some set up a security agency, while someone joined the government. Han Soo-young didn't join anyone. Instead, she became someone who taught things. Reading modern philosophy through web novels. Han Soo-young did her lectures featuring such a title from the center. After the last scenario ended, reality and fantasy were separated once more. And so, if you apply Roland Barthes' Morning Diary to this novel, most of the attendees carried the look of puzzlement, asking what kind of a dipping croissant in a samjang sauce rubbish this was, but a few students seemed to be rather interested by the idea. One of them raised up his hand and asked her, "Your viewpoint is quite intriguing, Professor, but I do have some objections." Han Soo-young nodded her head as consent to go ahead. The student continued on with a triumphant look. Did the author really intend for such a reaction? Is applying such a grandiose theory to a novel full of poor grammar and contradictory sentences a correct way to read it? To be honest, I don't think that's what the author was aiming for, just from looking at the overabundance of onomatopoeia and mimetic words. Han Soo-young glanced at the novel she brought along as her teaching material. For sure, it was a work filled with far too many mistakes. The student was carrying a satisfied smile as if he had finally landed a solid body blow to her. She pondered for a little while. She could have just explained to that student step by step. However, she chose not to do so. She instead began saying these following words. "You're right, only the author will know the truth. But if you say that, isn't that too irresponsible? What would it be like if someone starts judging you? Pardon? That someone might notice your not very well washed face, which might be a result of you rushing to get to the lectures on time. Or maybe they notice your toenails sticking out of your slippers first, and then they will start thinking like this. Ah, that guy, the way he looks, he must be pretty lazy, and there's no way a lazy person can be smart, so no need to listen to the opinions of someone like that. What are you even? Or maybe that student must have studied the contents of today's lecture throughout last night. You can tell by looking at how enthusiastically he's questioning the professor like that. Sure, his outer appearance is a bit shabby, but he might not care about such things to begin with. Yes, they could potentially think that way. Han Soo-young looked into the student's trembling eyes and continued on. Just like what you said earlier, the author of the novel probably didn't think about stuff like this. However, it is up to you to decide on what you'll get out of reading the novel. If you only find trash within, then it'll simply end as trash. But if it can impart just a tiny little bit of deeper meaning to you, then that alone will improve this work in your eyes. Again, it is up to you to decide which one it will be. But I'd really like you to choose the option where you get to appreciate your time a little bit better. If you don't, enduring my lectures will become a pretty arduous slog for you. The student closed his mouth shut and looked back at Han Soo-young. It was unknown whether he understood her or not, however. She thought that there was no helping it even if he couldn't. The student's eyes slowly moved this way and that, then he suddenly said something unexpected. By the way, Professor, are you going to write a new novel? Oh. You said this before, didn't you? You're an author because you write. If you don't write, then you're not an author. There was a subtle undertone of, I don't have to listen to someone like you who's no longer an author in his words. Han Soo-young didn't reply for a second or two. Her unclear, murky eyes seemed to be peering into the distant space. She then disinterestedly muttered out, Right, I'm not an author anymore. Excuse me. I don't have a reader who will read my work, you see. Before she could finish the rest of her words, though, the clock's bell went off first. Han Soo-young grinned and shrugged her shoulders. All right, then. The novel you need to read for the next class is. She stayed behind on the podium and bade farewell to the students leaving the lecture hall. Her eyes caught a certain text file visible on the screen of the notebook PC currently flipped open. It was a novel she began writing not too long ago as a sort of test. She accessed the file and quietly stared at the sentences she had written so far. It was then she sensed a presence from behind her. That was an interesting lecture. It had been nice if that person also attended it, though. Han Soo-young quickly turned the screen off and looked back only to discover a familiar face. The intruder was using her elegantly slender fingers to carefully sift through the lecture material scattered around the lecture desk. Ah, this lecture sounds like fun, too. Reading modern fantasy literature starting with Pierre Bourdieu, dissection of romance fantasies with Butler. Did you come here to look down on a web novel author? Yu Sang-ah, slightly tilting her head, smiled brightly. Her smile didn't seem to have changed a bit in the last 2 years. She deeply peered at Han Soo-young before asking a question. Why are you wearing glasses all of a sudden? Did your eyesight get worse? None of your business. Aha, I think I understand. You looked too young and your students were ignoring you, right? Han Soo-young scowled and angrily yanked the black-rimmed glasses off. Yu Sang-ah teasingly followed that up. Shall we go? Let me buy you a drink. 2 of them walked on the street, one sipping on the iced Americano, while the other sucking on the peach smoothie. They maintained this awkward distance and focused only on walking forward. Han Soo-young asked in passing, How's your work with the government? Is it fun? I'm not doing it for fun, you know. Who promised to come today? Hyunseong SSI is currently in the States, so it might be difficult for him, but it looks like Huey 1 SSI will make it. And as you know, CLHWA SSI is. What about the kids? They are coming. They never missed it before, after all. Not too long afterwards, the familiar street of Gwanghwamun greeted them. They entered a side street, walked for a bit longer, and eventually found the diner they were looking for. Its name was Mark and Selena. Han Soo-young unhesitantly pushed the door open. "Welcome to Wow, look who it is." The one welcoming them with fluent Korean was Selena Kim. Mark, expertly spinning pizza dough in the kitchen, whistled loudly. She spoke while guiding them inside. "Please wait for a little bit. Your order will arrive very soon." "What about the others who arrived before us?" Selena Kim pointed to the corner of the bar as if to say, "See for yourself." 3 familiar backs of the heads were gathered there. Han Soo-young did her best to hold back this certain impatient streak and cautiously sneaked behind the trio. And when she was right behind them, swiftly wielded her hands and pounded on the 3 heads in a row. "Ouch, which dumb asshole. Hey, our dear shorties, you've all grown a lot, haven't you? Ah Soo-young ihani, sang-a ihani." Since this was their first reunion in almost a year, they shared short impressions on how each other looked. And it really didn't take long before their food arrived, too. "What did you order exactly? What's the name of this dish?" "The Desolate Cabin's Demonic Intestine Stir-Fry." Mark, bringing out the dish, grinned. Han Soo-young formed a suspicious expression before stabbing at the dish shaped like the Korean squid sausage with a fork. "What the hell, it tastes great." As expected of its name, the dish was amazing. Her other companions loosened up and began enjoying the food. How long had it been since they got to sit around and enjoy their meal in leisure like this? Even though 2 years had passed since they crossed the world line and returned home, everything still felt like a lie to Han Soo-young. What? A TV panel installed above the bar was broadcasting scenes from a live concert. A pretty popular idol group was currently performing there. One of them was a monkey, the other was a dragon, and the last one was an archangel. The great sage wielding the mic delivered an impassioned vibrato-filled roar, which was promptly followed up by the shower of colorful spotlights focusing on the rear of the stage as Uriel made her entrance. Yu Sang-a, elegantly chewing on the intestines, muttered out, "They are really popular these days. I joined their fan club yesterday. The Uriel force is seriously." When Yi Jai-hai piped up, Yi Gil-yong sent in a quick tackle. "I can't bear to look at their performance anymore after seeing the one Dionysus has put on, you know. Especially the dude over there." "You mean Abyssal Black Flame Dragon? What's wrong, isn't he cute?" Shin Yuseung asked, and Yi Gil-yong narrowed his eyes before replying while chewing on his fork. "That's cute to you." The panel was now playing the Constellations' new track. Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, sporting an eye patch, performed a breakdance routine before exploding into a fiery, rapid-fire rap monologue. "This is the oldest fable, myth sung by the scenario, one man's evolution fatting with time. What the hell is he even singing about?" While the Black Flame Dragon's rapid rap bars continued to land, a couple more people opened the diner's door and entered inside. Their faces seemed a bit flushed, as if they had already knocked back a few cold ones somewhere else. They were Jang Ha-young and Jiang Hui-won. "What's this? Everyone was here already." Jang Ha-young quickly rushed in and caught Han Soo-young in a headlock. "How have you been?" Jiang Hui-won lightly high-fived Yu Sang-a's offered hand before shifting her gaze over to the panel to say something. "Arg, that rapping is really getting on my nerves. It's good to see everyone after such a long time." "Is this everyone for today?" "Looks that way." Jiang Hui-won began boasting about the new house she recently moved into. Her story generally involved how inconvenient the new place could sometimes be, as it was not within the area of train stations, and also how easy it was to get some exercise since a park was nearby, etc. She no longer lived in Gwanghwamun. She didn't even live anywhere near the 3rd subway line, too. Han Soo-young asked her, "Okay, so you two still together?" Those words caused the companions' attention to gather here. Jiang Hui-won smiled bitterly and shook around her alcohol cup. "No, not anymore." "How come?" "If we're together, we get reminded of things." "What things?" Hai and her sparkling eyes were urging Jiang Huiwan on. However, the latter didn't seem to be in much of a mirthful mood. She simply shook around her drink in silence. Hai eventually closed her wide-open mouth. The panel began playing the prelude to the next song. The Nameless Salvation Feat, Bald General of Justice, Jus. Han Soo-young listened to the song coming from the panel and murmured something as a follow-up a little bit later. I see, I guess you're right. With that, they stopped chatting altogether. The silence wrapped around their ankles like a quagmire. This was the reason why they didn't meet often. This was the story no one remembered. However, this story definitely did exist. Was 2 years enough time for that time period to become a story? Han Soo-young wanted to know. Still no news about Bu. I asked Miss Anna, but she says there hasn't been any communication so far. Before the companions made their way back, Bu went to the Dark Stratum to train. Because of that, they hadn't heard any news regarding her whereabouts for the past 2 years. What about Gong Pildu? Probably drinking alone in Chungmuro. Again, I think the shock of separating from his family was too great. That guy, I definitely told him to stay behind in the 1865th turn, so why did he stubbornly come back with us? How about Myung-oh Ajasi? He's living in the complex, so you must be clued up on his news, right? Han Soo-young. That guy, he's the same as always. What about the sooty bastard, though? I heard that he tried to get back to the pro gaming scene before quitting recently. No one replied. Jang Hayoung abruptly raised her cocktail glass. I don't know anymore. Let's just get drunk. But you look pretty drunk already. Don't stew up me. I'm gonna go all out today. Me too. Please give me a shot too. Yu Seung-ah, you're still underage. If you count my age from before the regression, I'm definitely an adult now, you know. While the pouting Shin Yu-seung started pestering the adults, Hai poured herself a stiff shot of soju, and without any side snacks, emptied it in one go. Soo-young Eoni, can you write my report for me, please? She then asked desperately. If you ask me that again, I'ma kill you. 2 years, around 730 days, if divided daily. Their current conversations could only take place because they had been desperately living their lives during these past 730 days. They went to school, they went to work, they moved house. To get away from that day, one step at a time, the companions tried to live their lives to the fullest. However, someone actually got closer to that day, in order to get away from it. Kim Dak-ya survived through a story called Ways of Survival. In that case, which story allowed us to survive? Jiang Huiwan watched Han Soo-young jotting down something on her memo pad before asking the latter, "What are you busy jotting down there?" "Just a force of old habit." "Are you still writing these days?" Her fingers writing down on the memo came to a stop. Yu Sang-ah replied in her stead. "I thought you were, judging from what I saw earlier." "Really, what are you writing? Is it a novel?" Hai, chewing on a mouthful of newly brought out snacks, quickly asked. "Nah, I'm just writing to get back in the groove." "Really? Are you planning to publish a new novel?" Just as Han Soo-young began pondering how she should reply, she heard a rustling noise coming from her side. "Maybe it's in here." Gil-yong had left the meal saying he needed to use the John, but even before anyone had noticed it, he was already back and holding Han Soo-young's notebook PC while giggling away. He had prior form of playing computer games on her device without permission, so he naturally knew the password and could log in without any issues. Shin Yu-seung shot him an angry glare, telling him to stop this rude act right now. Gil-yong. Arg, what now? His cheeks were flushed red as if he had been sneaking in a couple of sips of the booze. Shin Yu-seung grew nervous and cautiously studied Han Soo-young's moods, but what was going on here? Now normally, the latter would have blown her top by now and smacked the back of Gil-yong's head, but now she was wordlessly sipping on her cocktail, as if she didn't care if he read it or not. Gil-yong took that as a sign of consent, so he quickly opened the file. A short while later, Han Soo-young put her glass down and asked him, "Hey kid, you sure you have the guts to read it?" Gil-yong's complexion grew paler and paler. Even then, he didn't tear his eyes away from the screen. He continued to read, as if he'd get sucked into the screen at any moment now. Despite furrowing his brows in obvious torment, he continued to read and read. And a few minutes later, he raised his head, tears just about ready to flood out from his eyes. "How many chapters have you written so far, Nuna?" "Not that many. It's about, say, less than 2 books worth." "Can I read a bit more?" "Sure." Realizing that Yi Gil-yong's status was somewhat strange, the companions stood up from their chairs. "What's going on? What is its content about to make you react like this?" "I'm also kind of curious, since it's Soo-young's latest work." "I'll pass. I'm gonna wait until it comes out as a book." With the exception of Yi Jai-hai saying that while pouring herself another drink, everyone else gathered behind Yi Gil-yong. Han Soo-young quietly stared at them. One by one, their gazes were being sucked into the notebook screen. It shouldn't simply be because the story was too entertaining. No, it was that kind of a story to begin with, because this story was. Han Soo-young Yu. While listening to Jiang Hui-wan's trembling voice, Han Soo-young recalled the sentences she had already recorded. "Nothing can be changed through regression. It took me a very long time to realize that." That's right. Not a single thing could be changed through the act of regressing, just like how it was with them back on that day. But why such a story? Even if that was true, however, that didn't mean their regression didn't leave anything behind either. Kim Dak-ya survived through a story called Ways of Survival. In that case, which story allowed us to survive? Actually, Han Soo-young already knew the answer to that question. It's a story I wanted to show to that idiot. A story still remained for them. A story of a person they all loved. Epilogue 4, The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint 8 Fin. Chapter 544, Epilogue 4, The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint 9. I just wrote something, hoping to leave it as records of our past. Kim Dak-ya might wake up someday, you know. When that happens, he'd most likely have forgotten everything about us anyway. The companions read Han Soo-young's novel. Shin Yu-seung, her eyes reddened from tears, angrily rebuked Yi Gil-yong, telling him to slow down with the scrolling, while the boy sniffling away continued to click on the mouse. Yu Sang-ah, Jiang Hui-wan and Jang Ha-yong copied the file and read the novel on their own phones. Yu Sang-ah read the scene where she was making an appearance and smiled faintly. I did say something like that, did I? Perhaps she was missing those days, because she stroked the sentences on the phone's display, as if doing that might let her really touch Kim Dak-ya. Yi Jai-hai, sucking out the last drops from the booze bottle, unsteadily got up from her seat. What the hell? Is it really that fun? I knew not. Yi Jai-hai, going on a drunken rant, shoved Yi Gil-yong off the chair and took over the notebook PC. She then slapped her cheeks and tried to focus her blurry, half-closed eyes on the screen. How long went by like that? Sob Suobwaya, this novel is too sad, you know. You've only read the first chapter, so what the? Yi Jai-hai blew her nose noisily and chucked the soiled tissue in Yi Gil-yong's direction. She remained utterly unperturbed regardless of whether the angry boy was yelling at her or not. Even more so when she scrolled down and read the scene where she made her appearance in Chungmuro. Her excitement seemed to reach its peak. A girl wielding a lengthy sword stood in the exit as the faint rays of light shone through, while looking at Yi Jai-hai's hair dancing in the winds intermittently blowing in. Kyuyua, I'm so uber cool, aren't I? Arg, seriously now, go back up already. Despite Yi Gil-yong scolding her, Yi Jai-hai continued on Yapon. Like, what happens afterwards? What happens to Kim Dak-ya? In the end, she couldn't win against the booze in her system, and before long, her nose kissed the tabletop. Shin Yu-seung snatched the notebook PC away and asked a question while taking over the scrolling duty. Do I make an entrance later on, too? Everyone makes their appearance, although each person's specific importance will be a bit different, said Han Soo-young. But I really did my best, you know. Yes, I know. Don't worry, your story will show up lots of time later on. They already knew the ending to this story. What would happen to Kim Dakya and what experiences the companions would go through as the result? How the dream they dreamed crumbled away. They all knew too well. Despite knowing, however, Shin Yuseung continued to read the story. They strode forward one sentence at a time towards the predetermined end. The story they couldn't change was right here. Shin Yuseung used every ounce of her energy to read it as if each and every sentence disappearing behind was too lamentable, too sad to her. How wonderful would it have been if Dakya Ajasi was able to read this? Should we go to Hyung and read it for him? Han Soo-young thought about the slumbering Kim Dakya inside Yisialhwa's hospital. This novel was written for that guy, yet she didn't think he'd be reading it anytime soon. Could it be that, just maybe, this was this story's completion? The completed ending of those who had lost something. Could that be this novel's true purpose? Could these people be the true readers of this story? Do you think that Ajasi and the other world line will like reading too? The companions wouldn't be saved with just this measly little story, but at the very least, they should be able to endure their lives while reading and thinking about it, just like how Kim Dakya reading The Ways of Survival did. I wonder, maybe. Ajasi is probably Ajasi in that place too, definitely. Who knows, he might have ended up as a bug. Keep talking like that if you want to die, you Gil-yong. I'd have raised him up if he was reborn as an insect, and read books to him every day too. A couple of adults heard the boy's mindless babble and broke out into chuckles. Yu Sang-ah spoke up next. Regardless of where he's born and what's he born as, Dakya SSI will always be Dakya SSI. Han Soo-young nodded her head. Kim Dakya should be living a new life in a world out there somewhere. Kim Dakya living his life while reading a story written by someone else and feeling happy or sad or even moved. The people of this world would reminisce about such Kim Dakya's tale and live their lives, praying that Kim Dakya of that world would not be miserable, praying that he'd get to live in as much happiness as his companions were remembering him in this world. Shin Yuseung, repeatedly reading the early parts, spoke up, her voice sounding like a soft sigh. I can't read it anymore because I'm scared it'll end too soon. It won't end that soon, replied Han Soo-young. Are you going to write the next chapter too? Yeah. It would have been so wonderful if we could send this novel to the other world too. It's a shame that only we get to read it. The other world. Han Soo-young became momentarily dazed at that unexpected idea. She had never even thought about it. It wasn't a possibility to start with too. She pondered this for a bit longer, but before she could say something, a piece of breaking news came out of the TV screen. Breaking news just in. A terrorist has attacked the Scenario Museum located in Gwanghwamun. Terrorists in this day and age. Jang Hyong shook her head. Most of the system's influence had already disappeared from this world, so possessing star relics didn't automatically mean you'd be able to do something with them. It was right then that Jiang Huiwon's phone started ringing. Hello, this is Jiang Huiwon, the representative of Iron Caps, the trusted security organization protecting your... Excuse me, where? Who showed up? The clearly flustered Jiang Huiwon raised her head and looked at the TV panel. The news broadcast's ticker tape continued to move along. Identity of the terrorist is now known to be a transcender formerly known as the Conquering King. Conquering King. A short while later, the terrorist's face showed up on the screen. The terrorist Conquering King Yu Young-hyuk, 33, unemployed. Stop him. The riot police arriving on the scene blocked off the museum's access and stood before the approaching man. However, he used fleet-footed movements to evade their truncheons. The jet-black coat danced in the air as the man's hands went to work, and the riot police rushing in were scattered away like the breaking waves. Yurak. He's using the system's powers. Hurry up and call the security company, and get the government-affiliated constellations too. Yu Young-hyuk's red phoenix Shunpo spat out reddish-yellow licks of flames as he dashed forward. Each step taken emitted truly stupendous heat wave, and the members of riot police had to back away in fear. Before long, He had reached the front of the Scenario Museum's doorstep, the place where star relics from the Age of Apocalypse were stored. This was where the important artifacts not open to public had been gathered. The riot police chasing after Yu Young-hyuk shouted out, "He's just a transcender from the old generation." The battle array formation, the constellation names of the North Stars worked together to create near the museum will. North Star 5 March formation has been triggered. Yu Young-hyuk analyzed the inner workings of the array formation blocking him. It was a Murim-style battle array formation that followed the laws of the North Star and 5 elements of the universe to create a remarkable unison of the Life Gate and Death Gate. His eyes emitted golden rays of light as his dark heavenly demon sword accurately stabbed into 7 separate points. Kurirarurung. Crazy son of a how could he? These young riot police members who didn't know much about the Age of Apocalypse could only look on with their jaws hitting the floor. Even they had heard of the stories, of course. 20 years ago, a man who dared to stare arrogantly at the stars of the heavens existed. It was only a story to them, however. A man who could evenly match up to the constellations. They believed that no such man could have ever existed. Too bad for them, the living proof was now standing before their eyes. Yu Young-hyuk stepped within the crumbling array formation. No one could stop him now. It was also then someone appeared among the rising dust clouds. Conquering King, what do you think you're doing? Surely, someone like you don't have a reason to steal items such as the star relics. It was Han Dong-hoon, an incarnation affiliated with the government. He was famed for sending messages to the opposition's eyes rather than addressing them directly. Yu Young-hyuk quietly stared at the message before pointing at the steeple of the museum. A small ship hung up there like some kind of a symbol. I need that ship. That's just a replica, it can't even fly. We'll see once I activate it. I know that you've been roaming the world without reporting periodically to the world government. Despite knowing that, the world government decided to turn a blind eye, because they respect your achievements from the Age of Apocalypse. However, that ends today. If you insist on behaving like this, then we won't have any choice but to use force. Almost at the same time as those words arrived, powerful fighting spirit exploded out from Han Dong-hoon's entire body. He, too, was a survivor from the era of scenarios, a powerful figure who came to be known as the King of Shadows, by the time scenarios were drawing to a close. You wish to stop me? Yu Young-hyuk took a single step forward. At the same time, humans of the surroundings knelt down simultaneously. Han Dong-hoon's expression stiffened, and he quickly performed hand signs. All personnel get ready to. Even before the message could be finished, shadows hiding on the museum's rooftop began falling like dead cicadas. Tumble drop. The fallen agents writhed around like worms. Traces of their pressure points being depressed could be seen throughout their bodies. Surprisingly, over 30 incarnations were dispatched to this place together with Han Dong-hoon, yet all these elite warriors were taken care of even before anyone had noticed it. Get out of my way. Han Dong-hoon's shoulders trembled imperceptibly. For the past 20 years after the scenarios ended, the strongest incarnation he knew of was the prophet Anna Croft, the only surviving incarnation that could compare to the constellations. However, even if she came, could she stop this monster? Han Dong-hoon, respond Han Dong-hoon. If he didn't escape from here, he'd get killed. Han Dong-hoon knew this, yet he couldn't even lift his feet. An incredible amount of killing intent had tightened around him like a noose. Just who would be able to stop this transcender? The Murim world's transcenders residing on another planet, or constellations currently on a world tour. No, even they might find it too much. The monster before his eyes was an existence that had reached the highest realm even among the transcenders. Post-destruction of Star Stream, constellations could no longer exercise the power levels of their past selves. That's why. Captain Han Dong-hoon evaded. Yu Young-hyuk's sword moving, and Han Dong-hoon squeezing his eyes shut, as well as an ear-splitting noise exploding, all happened at the same time. Scary waves of magical force shoved Han Dong-hoon's body away. It had been really long time since he last saw a clash heavy enough to cause the storm of probabilities aftermath. Su-cha-cha-cha-chu. He held onto the crack on the ground and endured the storm of aftermath, only to be greeted by an unbelievable spectacle. FCK man, trying to use my powers in such a long time is killing me. Someone was blocking the conquering king's sword. Constellation, architect of the false last act, is unleashing her power. Fable fragments of the Bureau is supporting the architect of the false last act. She was one of only a handful of the truly strong who could stop that monster, Yu Young-hyuk. The purple-hued magical energy oozing out from her entire figure was dyeing the surroundings in a foreboding manner. Yu Young-hyuk, what kind of stupidity is this? Said the Empress of Black Flames, Han Soo-young. This isn't a matter you should concern yourself with. Why shouldn't I? Our former regressor friend suddenly decided to become a terrorist for free, so how can I not? The comrade of the past has lost his way and became corrupted, so it's the duty of the superhero to take up on the responsibility of Rahabi. Quaboom. God admit what gives. Why are you going mental here, man? Get out of the way. I don't plan to exchange sophistries with you. No, you better start talking. That's always been your damn problem. You've been behaving nicely for the past 2 years, so why the hell? Sweeyish. She pulled out a dagger from her inner pocket, gritted her teeth, and defended against Yu Young-hyuk's attack. The overabundant bombardment of the sword energy began forcing her body back bit by bit. Han Soo-young glanced in the direction she was being pushed back. The Scenario Museum. No matter how hard she thought about it, it made no sense. Yu Young-hyuk had no reason to target that place. He wouldn't get any stronger than he already was by possessing a couple more star relics at this point. Besides, a star relic someone like him might find desirable wouldn't even be in this plot. It was then her eyes caught the sight of a certain something. Hey you, it can't be. Her hair strands slowly began floating up, creeping. Ominous waves of energy spread out everywhere. Cold rage was filling up Han Soo-young's voice. Is it because of that? Yu Young-hyuk's eyes were seething, and his irises were reflecting the hull of the replica final arc, located on top of the steeple. Epilogue 4, The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint 9 Fin. Chapter 545, Epilogue 4, The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint 10. Han Soo-young yelled out. You stupid bastard, did you forget already? This world line's arc has already. Yu Young-hyuk's sword thrust dug into her opening. The moment she gasped out, her dagger was already flying away. Blood spluttered from the cut wound. His sword was now pointing straight her neck. Young-hyuk SSI, please stop. Hold on, master, are you mad? What's gotten into you? The companions arriving belatedly approached them to stop the fighting. However, Yu Young-hyuk didn't even look behind at them as he swung his sword. The gobsmacking level of magical energy waves shot out from the dark heavenly demon sword and drew a line of roiling flames one step in front of the companions. No one crosses that line. If you do, I will cut. Why? Smack. Han Soo-young's left foot, rising up in the blink of an eye, accurately kicked his wrist. The dark heavenly demon sword, gripped in his hand, flung away, drew circles in the air before stabbing into the ground. Han Soo-young growled at him. You Young-hyuk, I'm sure you already know this, but I really hate to see a rotten apple spoiling the whole barrel. You know, I was feeling pretty good up until a few minutes ago. Specifically, before you started doing this crap. That is, I guess the peace of the past 2 years have been too sweet for me, seeing how I've completely forgotten about what kind of a bastard you are. It was hard to tell just who her boiling rage was directed at. Han Soo-young recalled the faces of her companions reading her novel, the faces that grew at ease as they read the story. The companions, everyone else, even herself, they were about to feel brave enough to finally take that one step forward, away from that day. Yet, Han Soo-young stopped both Jiang Hui-won and Yu Sang-ah about to cross the burning line. You too, stay back. Looks like today is finally the day I pound some sense into this guy. As soon as those words ended, both the figures of Han Soo-young and Yu Jung-hyuk vanished. The place they met again was in the air dozens of meters off the ground. The thunderclap-like explosions rang out, and their fists collided against one another. Ruyumbol Kirarurung. The blade of Han Soo-young's hand slammed hard into Yu Jung-hyuk's waist, while his right kick landed on her solar plexus. The exchange of attacks and defenses that even constellations' eyesights found hard to keep up continued on. Blood trickled down her lips, while large, bloody bruises formed on his arms raised up to guard him. Yijai, watching the fight unfold, couldn't hold back and reach for her own sword. It was Yu Sang-ah who stopped her. "Iani, but why? Let them be for the time being." Perhaps she had predicted something, because while stopping the companions, she spread out her lotus pedestals as well. She was planning to protect the civilians from the storm of aftermath soon to visit them. Right next second, the atmosphere up in the sky began to change. Great Fable, torch that swallowed the myth, has started its stammered attempt at storytelling. Great Fable, liberator of the forgotten ones, is waking up from the darkness. The clash of these two managed to awaken the old fables. Han Soo-young summoned all of her strength to break through Yu Jung-hyuk's fist and shouted out, "Speak up, why today of all days? Why have you been staying quiet for the last 2 years only to start this crap today? None of your business." Aha, is that so? She didn't plan on going this far. However, looking at the expressionless face of Yu Jung-hyuk acting like a damn stubborn mule, she simply couldn't rein in her boiling anger anymore. "I always hated you, and regretted it too. Why did I write the story of someone like you with my own hands?" She'd never have said these words in any other times. Even then, she continued to spit out everything anyway. "I cursed my other self. If this story didn't exist, none of these things would have happened. No one would have died, and Kim Dok-ya might have." Yu Jung-hyuk's fist, finding that brief window of opening, cut her words short. He kept his mouth resolutely shut and continued to fight. Though she hadn't heard a proper answer yet, Han Soo-young knew why he was trying to get a hold of the final arc. "We already failed. Since we came home with our tails between our legs, you should have quietly accepted it and moved on. Have you really forgotten everything the fourth wall said to us?" She knew the truth, and that was why she just couldn't stand it anymore. "You shouldn't have been greedy. No, YOUSHL DVBN con T and TYTH 49% Kim Dok-ya." The fourth wall's voice from that day, the one she had never forgotten until now. Yu Jung-hyuk finally opened his mouth, spoken like a true loser. "You simply gave up, that's all." Every time their fists collided, the worn-out fables scattered in the air. The fragments emitting faint rays of light settled down on his cheeks. It was only then did she spot his messed-up appearance. The unkempt, stiffened hair, and his rather unsightly-looking, unwashed face. Han Soo-young sucked in her breath and took a step back in that instant. Some memories brushed past her head just then. Yu Mia, showing up one day while crying her eyes out and saying that her oppa had just disappeared, and Yu Jung-hyuk, walking away from the pro-gamer job he barely managed to earn back, and vanishing into thin air. Should I have started off with how he had been doing all this time? Golden aura was focusing on his right hand. That was the beginning of the breaking the sky force punch. He was being deadly serious here. Han Soo-young hurriedly unfurled her right hand. Stigma character summon is activating. At the bare minimum, if she used this skill to fling him far away, then applicable individual is no longer a character. She belatedly realized it. The Yu Jung-hyuk, standing before her eyes, was not the character from the Ways of Survival she had written. After Kim Dok-ya's final act had arrived, and after the Ways of Survival's story came to an end, Yu Jung-hyuk had completely broken free of the position of the character. A punch wrapped in pure golden light scythed the air and flew in. She activated every single evasion skill she could. The attack brushed past her shoulder with the thinnest margin imaginable. The storm of aftermath from that improbably powerful punch pricked her painfully. Yu Jung-hyuk muttered out, Your skills have barely lost any of their original powers. Is this due to the system's grace? The only reason why Han Soo-young's skills could still exhibit such power was because she received the Bureau's fable from the 1865th turn's Bihyung. Yu Young-hyuk asked her with an emotionless voice. This world no longer needs the system. Yet, why did you receive that fable from him? Obviously to maintain Kim Dokya's life. They went through with the group regression because Kim Dokya's avatar was increasingly getting weaker, and she received the Bureau's fable just in case something similar happens to Kim Dokya. Why did you do something like that? You should know this. That fool cannot wake up again, said Yu Young-hyuk. Kim Dokya isn't dead. Why? If you really believe that, then why are you stopping me? For a moment there, she became speechless. Yu Young-hyuk then flashed right behind her and slammed down on her back. Han Soo-young crash-landed on the ground. She coughed out thick dust and stood back up, then shouted at him while tottering unsteadily. Yu Young-hyuk, wake the hell up. You think this is what Kim Dokya really wants? He told you, didn't he? He told you not to abandon this world, and you also agreed. That's right, I agreed not to regress. Don't make me laugh. You can't regress anymore, that's what. If you still could do it, you'd probably have gone back. I may have. Yu Young-hyuk's golden eye began to glow brightly within the thick dust cloud, and that eye was now questioning Han Soo-young. Are you any different? She couldn't answer back, but in her stead, Kim Dokya's fables still remaining within her grasp replied. Fable, one who opposes miracles, is lamenting in sorrow. These were words that she just couldn't let go. She wrote them down somewhere sometimes to endure her life, telling herself not to regress, to live in the present. She continued to reflect on those obvious-sounding words of the past and continued to endure moment by every moment. That was her past 2 years. It seems that you two couldn't forget anything. Shut up. Han Soo-young dashed forward in an instant and punched him squarely in the face. Every time their fists flew out, the fables they shared and compiled together writhed violently. Fable, King of Kaiksenix, is being agitated. She believed that she worked hard to endure. She believed that a lot of time had passed by now, as much as all the sentences she had written down. She breathed, she ate, and she slumbered. Han Soo-young survived in that manner. You are not a regressor because you regress. However, could she really say she had been living a life that way? Some people would live their entire lives inside the already ended past. Every time bones in her fists were crushed, fables scattered away little by little, fables, the raw memories preserved as was without any revisions. Han Soo-young reflexively began retrieving these scattering fables. She didn't want to let go of any one of them. She didn't want to forget about a single thing. For the past 2 years, she hadn't been able to take a single step forward. Han Soo-young panted breathlessly and spoke up. What do you think will change if you do this now? Even if you leave, you won't find Kim Dokya, and you can't even go anywhere. Besides, this world line's arc is already destroyed. Did you forget what happened back during the final battle? That isn't an arc, and we can't leave this world line even if we wanted to. The powers of the two people collided once more, accompanied by the loud kudujudu noise. The storm was generated from their magical energy. Yu Young-hyuk, standing in the center of the storm, then replied, I've compiled so many fables up until now, but I still do not know what my black is. The vigorous, ferocious fable exploded within the air. He didn't pay any heed to the precious fables being damaged and simply swung his fists. You wrote my story. In that case, you should also know where my story is supposed to end. At that moment, sentences began streaming past Han Soo-young's head. Did Yu Young-hyuk really come here to acquire the final arc? The belated realization flooded in. The regressor, weary of the scenarios, could only carry on because the scenarios existed. Yu Young-hyuk then began gathering all of his remaining fables. All these fables belonging to a man who had finally escaped from the curse of regression bared their collective fangs at Han Soo-young. Hit me with everything you've got, Han Soo-young. This was Yu Young-hyuk's last stand. Every cell in her body was ringing alarm bells. The regressor who had repeated lengthy lifetimes. A certain emotion floated upon those eyes that had been described dozens, hundreds of times before. Han Soo-young knew very well what that emotion was. Yu Young-hyuk wished to die in this place. Not by the hands of anyone, but by the existence who had written his very first sentence. Screw you, you've never, ever done what I wanted from you, so what the hell? Quiet. Yu Young-hyuk, unleashing all of his might, swung his fist again, one attack that focused all of his great fables. The climax of the fight was about to be reached. Han Soo-young too unleashed all of her fables. And then, an explosion akin to a star blowing up rocked the world. Everything hurt as if her entire body had been pounded on. Every bone in her right fist thrust forward was broken. Her companions cried out, while other spectators screamed. Han Soo-young endured the force of impact while stuck in this ringing pain harsh enough to tear out her eardrums. Her whole body was now left in tatters. Yu Young-hyuk was collapsed on the ground, unmoving. Her heart began pounding away. Yu Young-hyuk. The tips of his hand trembled ever so faintly. He slowly opened his eyes and looked up at her. She panted heavily and barely managed to force out some words. This is a little different from back then in the dark castle, right? The moment she finished saying that, both of her legs gave way. When did she get hit? All the bones in her knees had been completely crushed. Doesn't look that way, muttered Yu Young-hyuk. You son of a... Two of them collapsed face first into the ground. Han Soo-young crawled towards Yu Young-hyuk. Her anger didn't seem like it'd abate soon unless she smacked him just one more time somehow. Her hand, shaking precariously, was about to slap him in the back of his head, but unfortunately, his own right hand, shaking pitifully, grabbed onto her wrist first. And so, the arms of two people started a contest of what little strengths they had left in midair, only for them miss each other and sag down weakly. They truly had not one drop of energy left to continue. The torn scars left behind in the skis by the collision of their fables could be seen, and the view of the distant star stream could be spied within the horribly torn sky. The few remaining stars of the night sky sparkled and sent their faint rays of light on the two people. Yu Young-hyuk, staring at that spectacle for a long while, spoke in passing. Kim Dak-ya is supposed to be scattered to the rest of the universe. Kim Dak-ya's soul scattered away into fine little pieces. How much of him truly remained within those tiny fragments? Even Han Soo-young couldn't be sure. Except that she was sure of the tiny Kim Dak-jas being born as some things in the mouths of the world she hadn't even thought of. He might be reborn as a human. Maybe the place was similar to Earth. Maybe this time he'd be born in another continent, not in the Korean peninsula. Do you think that that fool has become happier now? The moment she heard him, Han Soo-young felt that something had finally come to an end. The mouth of her heart ached really painfully. She could clearly hear the sounds of something breaking, the sounds of a story coming to an end, the sounds of their truly long mourning finally drawing to a close. That was the sound of someone only living in their past finally letting go of that very past. Right at that moment, Han Soo-young was overcome by the bizarre guilt of corruption, of betrayal. Kim Dak-ya, was it possible that he didn't want us to give up? Could it be that even if everyone else let go of their long, agonizing sorrow, he wished for just one person to continue on with the acts of sheer stupidity at the cost of ruining their life? She heard Yu Young-hyuk coughing away painfully and muttered out what she needed to say. I'm sure he's doing well. He's a tough guy after all. He's probably living a life of his own out there and living it happily too. Who knows, he might be reading some other weird book in the meantime too. Even if we find him, the fool probably won't remember anything. This was the end of their mourning. There was no meaning in crossing the world line anymore. Even if they did find that Kim Dak-ya, what could they possibly do? They couldn't certainly impose the past on someone who didn't remember. The reincarnated Kim Dak-ya wasn't the Kim Dak-ya. The one they knew no longer existed in this universe, no matter where they looked. Even then, Han Soo-young still blurted out something strange. We don't know that. If the ways of survival also exists in the place where he's reincarnated into, then. Right away, she felt puzzled by why she said something like that. As I said, the ways of survival. Her mouth continued to mutter out, perhaps to reject her own will. Kim Dokya, the most ancient dream, has been scattered throughout the universe. Her mind began spitting out disorienting sentences, one after the other. This universe is maintained by the imagination of the most ancient dream. In that case, what is the most ancient dream dreaming about right now? Creeping goosebumps crawled up her arms. She didn't even want to think about it yet. Ajasi from another world line probably likes books too, right? This was truly a nonsensical delusion. Even then, despite knowing that, Han Soo-young couldn't stop her thought process. Kim Dokya, reading someone's novel while carrying an expression she couldn't imagine on the other side of the distant universe. That guy, is he still curious about the conclusion to this story, I wonder? Han Soo-young asked. What are you talking about? What if the countless Kim Dokjas scattered to the rest of universe read a certain story all at the same time? Why did constellations try to spread their own fable as far and as wide as possible? How come the foundation of this world was stories? What if all those Kim Dokjas who had forgotten that he is the most ancient dream, dreams of the same story? The way to rediscover Kim Dokya, without ruining the lives of the reincarnated Kim Dokjas living in other world lines. Han Soo-young's hazy, indistinct-sounding voice continued on. What if the story he's dreaming of is the same as the story we all wish for? Her chain of thought was broken only after a pitch-black shadow was cast over her head. This area was earmarked to be renovated as a public park, but thanks to you two, it's complete chaos here. Since when was it Anna Croft was standing there? Are you planning to cross the world line again? Han Soo-young belatedly regained her wits after seeing that woman's face. She then remembered the delusion she'd been cooking up just now and felt ashamed by it. From the get-go, that idea was nonsense. To make Kim Dokjas of other world lines dream of the novel she had written. What a crazy and empty talk that was. More importantly, there was no way to cross to other world lines in this world, anyway. But then, Anna Croft's expression was somewhat strange. I thought that a day like this might come sooner or later. Her eye was emitting the crimson glow. Her gaze was now directed at the steeple of the museum. At the replica of the final arc. Han Soo-young's heart began beating faster and faster. Such a thing was not possible. It shouldn't be possible, but how? Kugugugu. Slowly, so very slowly, the so-called replica began floating up from the top of the museum. Yu Young-hyuk and his brows shot up high was already sitting up as he stared at the airborne object. The arc, its size might have been very small, but without a doubt, it was still an arc. I collected some parts and had it fixed for the past 20 years, just in case. If none of you had returned, then I was planning to go and visit you, although not many parts could be salvaged and the vessel has not been repaired completely. The arc slowly floating up opened like a capsule and revealed its interior. This was a very small final arc, where only one person could barely fit inside. It can be used, except only one person can ride it. Epilogue 4, The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint 10 Fin. Chapter 546, Epilogue 5 The Eternity in Epilogue 1. Han Soo-young and Yu Young-hyuk were taken away in stretchers to the hospital where Kim Dokya was staying. While listening to the round of Yisial Hwa's non-stop nagging, Han Soo-young calmly organized the plan of action she came up with. And exactly 1 hour later, she told the companions of her idea by using the most concise words she could think of, while leaving nothing out in the process. However, you speaking concisely and precisely didn't automatically mean your audience would concisely and precisely understand you. The companions' reactions were like this. What do you want to do again? Jiang Huiwan asked back, while both Shin Yu-seung and Yi Gil-yong dropped the jaws ever so slightly. Han Soo-young replied, okay, so if I put it in a simpler perspective. You are aware of what you've been saying until now, right? So you did understand me. We can't do that thing again. Did you already forget about the memories from 2 years ago? What happened to us after the group regression? I'm not saying we should regress. This and that are the same, if we cross the world lines again. I'm also not saying we should distort the other world line's future either. You did hear what I said, right? I just want to send a single novel to that side, that's all. Yijai, silently listening to the conversation, finally opened her mouth. Okay, what you're saying is, you want to show the novel written on this side to Dakya Ajasi in the other world line. Did I hear you right? You did. What meaning doing that will have? Han Suyong started her explanation in a composed voice. The most ancient dream is Kim Dakya, and that Kim Dakya was broken down into many pieces and scattered around to the rest of the world lines before reincarnating into different existences. You with me so far? You think I'm a dummy because I got an F last time. Okay, so what's next? The important part starts from there. The newly reincarnated Kim Dakya might not be Kim Dakya anymore. However, that doesn't mean he isn't the most ancient dream, either. They themselves might not be aware of it, but all those souls are the most ancient dream that maintains this universe. Back when they escaped from the final wall for the last time, no one was left behind in the subway. Yet the universe's time didn't stop, meaning the most ancient dream hadn't disappeared. The souls that used to be Kim Dakya had scattered to the rest of the universe and reincarnated, and unbeknownst to even themselves, they were dreaming of the different universes. Yu Sang-an nodded her head as if she understood it. So, you meant to use their power of imaginations. The imagination of the most ancient dream is reality, after all. Making the reincarnated Dakya SSI dream of the conclusion we all want. That's right. It'll be like we're presenting him with the source of imagination, so that they can dream about this world's conclusion. Han Suyong studied the faces of her companions one at a time and continued on. No one will get hurt this way. No one born in other world lines will get harmed. All we have to do is to make those guys read a certain story, that's it. Countless Kim Dokjas scattered throughout many world lines would all be imagining it. Those born with various appearances, living in various environments. There was no meaning in meeting them or bringing them here. The only thing the companions could hope for in this situation was a miracle. A miracle that could bring back Kim Dakya they all remembered. It was fine even if it was all a delusion, a lie, if only he could imagine their happiness. If only all those countless Kim Dokjas imagined the one single universe. A short bout of silence descended on the room. A similar sort of expression was floating up on the faces of everyone. They knew full well such a plan had zero chance of becoming reality. In order to make this plan work, several impossible hurdles had to be cleared first. The one who spoke up as the representative of the companions was Yi Hyun-seong, who returned to the country only about 30 minutes ago. Suyong SSI. He had returned in a hurry after hearing about Yu Yonghyuk and Han Suyong's news. His eyes, always burning with righteousness and will to fight, were now obscured by heavy shadows. We're all too tired, we're too afraid of hopping. What made a person truly exhausted was not despair. No, it was hope that seemingly was on the cusp of coming true but would never become reality. Han Suyong also knew that. She slowly squeezed her fist tightly. I know that. That's why I'm asking all of you for a favor. Yi Hyun-seong's eyes trembled the moment he heard the word favor. Han Suyong had never, ever used that sort of expression before. I'm aware that it has a very low chance of becoming true. That's why this is merely a type of ceremony, if you will. Something that must be done to put the finishing touch on the past and to live the remainder of my life properly. Jiang Huiwan asked her, what can we help you with? Rather than a verbal reply, Han Suyong placed her notebook PC on the hospital room's desk and accessed a certain text file, one that they were intimately familiar with. A novel with its title still left as no subject. Han Suyong slowly, so very slowly, began typing the title of the novel. From that day on, Han Soo-young poured her entire being on writing the novel along with assistance from her companions. Even if it was her, she didn't retain every bit of memories in perfect order, so to complete the story, she had to borrow her companions' own memories. So we'll make Dakya Ajasi read this novel, but how will we do that? We somehow need to make him come across it naturally, without him feeling any disharmony, to the extent that he doesn't even realize he's currently imagining this world. Meaning, we gotta write a seriously entertaining story. Dakya Hyung read a boring novel till its end, so won't he read it even if we write it like whatever? Han Soo-young looked at the glib-sounding Yi Gil-yong and shook her head. We don't know what might happen, so we gotta do our best. Kim Dakya of Other World Line might not be as patient as ours after all. Let me help. Me too. Nuna, you don't know the lingo the teens use nowadays, right? The novel was compiled in Kim Dakya's hospital room most of the time. After ending her lectures, Han Soo-young would come to visit him in his ward. Other companions also took turns to pay him a visit. Sorry I'm late. I had an announcement to make tomorrow, said Yi Jae-hai. It would have been still fine to come after you were finished, replied Han Soo-young. No can do. Today's the scene of my awakening, right? Yi Jae-hai's voice was filled with so much excitement. She scanned the manuscript Han Soo-young had written and continued to yap on. Wow, this place. I really almost died back then. Hugh, reading this part again still gives me the goosebumps. Iani, you don't mind me asking you when I'm supposed to show up, Ag? If you're planning to bother me, just get out. Why are you being so cold? I even found a mistake in the setting, you know. A mistake where? I never said anything like this. Yi Jae-hai pointed at the screen. Han Soo-young glanced at the younger girl's phone and spoke up. A closer look revealed that the scene in question came from when Yi Jae-hai was saying her piece during the cinema dungeon. Han Soo-young explained. Some creative license is unavoidable, so some parts might be a little different from what happened in reality, but that part. Why do you think you're alone? We're here together, aren't we? No, hang on a sec, I'm always by your side, aren't I? So don't lose hope, think about our kid. I wrote that according to what Uriel told me, though. 1 day, 2 days, 3 sentences were diligently compiled. When she couldn't recall the past properly, she'd even start pinching the sleeping Kim Dakya's cheeks. And when her resentment flared up for no reason whatsoever, she'd even write some weird things in the novel as well. Find the ugly king. Well, it probably didn't matter anyway. He'd not even realized that this was his own story after all. The companions came to visit the hospital room in alternating turns, as if they were entering confessional booths. Actually, Dakya SSI was cursing a little bit during here. Don't write what I just said, understand? Hey, I told you to omit the part, so why? They all seemed quite surprised by the fact that they still remembered so much of the story, and no, wait, Nuna, I do respect Hyung, but what are you doing portraying me as some sort of a religious fanatic? And they seemed to be finding peace with the fact that they still remembered this story, too. They sometimes cried, or read the memos containing story beats that would soon form the part of the story in the future. Shin Yuseung asked, by the way, why did you portray regression so negatively like this? Well, even in that world, Kim Dakya should only have one life, that's why. He might get badly influenced by reading this, right? I mean, he could still be a young kid there. At her reply, a shadow drew upon Shin Yuseung's complexion. But we regressed, didn't we? In that case, will it be fine to write this part differently from reality? Nah, I'm just going to write it as is. Pardon, but why? Doesn't matter who. Every human is a regressor, you see. There was a certain sentence she thought of while fighting against Yu Young-hyuk. In all honesty, she didn't expect Shin Yuseung to get what she was saying anyway. The younger girl stared at the sentences for a little while before shifting her gaze to the outside of the window. Our regression couldn't influence this world line at all. When I think about it sometimes, it feels like the last night's passing dream. What is the difference between the past that couldn't change the present and a delusion that can't change anything. Han Soo-young was somewhat taken aback from that, and her lips bobbed up and down in a pout, only for Shin Yuseung to shrug her shoulders and smile back at her. What if we write it too hard to understand and Dakya Ajasi doesn't get it? Kim Dakya will definitely get it. You really do believe in him, don't you? If you're going to bother me like this, just get out. No, wait. I've organized everything that happened in the past, you know. Even the disaster of flood you asked me about I have. Not everyone was as helpful as Shin Yu-seung, though. No, actually, the majority of them simply interfered with her writing instead. For instance, in Jang Ha-young's case. Hey you said I'm the second part's protagonist. What are you basing that on? You making fun of me? That's just a figure of speech. You're not the real protagonist, right? Han Soo-young replied. Even then, I'll write side stories about you, in huge chapters no less. Cool. YCLHWA passing by while pushing a stretcher past the room also said something. Normally, healers in a story like this are portrayed as heal shuttles, aren't they? Fine, YCLHWA, you get a side story too. On top of this, Yi Gil-yong completely skipping his school to come to the hospital, and Yi Hyun-seong throwing a big tantrum as if he had been wronged by something. You just omitted all the events I had to go through after signing the contract with Abaddon. And also, I've lots of skills, so why is it always cockroaches this and cockroaches that? You've completely revised my military life. But haven't I earnestly described everything that happened since my days as a private? Both of you, will you just put a lid on it? Kim Dakya is the main character of this story. I'm telling you, this isn't your story. Han Soo-young yelled at them. Even constellations came to visit one by one after hearing about the news. For instance, Uriel carrying huge piles of unidentifiable documents while kitted out in a disguise of sunglasses and a face mask. You should have called me right away if you were planning to write something like this. And I have this much extensive data on the subject matter, too. Can any of this data even be trusted? I mean, what you said differed quite a lot from what Yi Jai-hai told me, you know. And no, well, it can be a teeny bit different, but this universe is truly vast and countless Kim Dokjas are living out there in countless world lines, so. After that, the great sage, heaven's equal. If you're going to write about my fable, you should have at least read the fully translated Journey to the West. Have you? I read it as manga. In that case, you should know by now who the real protagonist of the Journey to the West is. I thought it was Tang Sanzeng. Then the abyssal black flame dragon. How disappointing. Have you really forgotten about my true name? It's already the second part, so how come my true name hasn't been? You never told me in the first place. And you know what? You don't have to tell me either. And so, around the time the first draft of the manuscript with about 250 chapters was completed, Han Soo-young became almost completed, wasted from all the fatigue building up inside her. It'd be her first time writing a novel so arduously like this. So many parts of it weren't to her liking, and too many portions needed lots of revising. But right now, the quantity was her priority. Because Han Soo-young, it'll be this week, Saturday. Because there wasn't a lot of time left, that's why. Epilogue 5, The Eternity in Epilogue 1 Fin. Chapter 547, Epilogue 5, The Eternity in Epilogue 2. Now normally, you'd need around 2 years at most to complete the first draft of a manuscript. However, there was no such leeway in this world line. The system is losing its powers too quickly. If we miss this week, then I fear that we won't have enough persuasive power to launch the arc. In the end, Han Soo-young decided to start the first wave of transmission after finishing up the second part of the manuscript. The companions grew excited after hearing about the news of the manuscript's dispatch. Yu Sang-a asked, "How will you transport the file? In a USB?" "We'll prepare for various contingencies, but fundamentally it needs to be taken in the form of a fable," replied Han Soo-young. "Who will deliver it, though?" "Obviously me." "No can do. If Soo-young SSI leaves, who will look after Dakya SSI of this place if something happens to him. Even if he was only a shell, he was still Kim Dakya. If something strange happened to him, and Han Soo-young possessing the Bureau's fable wasn't around, his main body might crumble away. Yu Sang-ah continued on. Let me go. I know the exact coordinates of the world line where Dakya SSI has reincarnated. But that only prompted Jiang Huiwan to try to dissuade her. Sang-ah SSI, you need to defend this world, you know. Let me go. Give me the coordinates. No way, I'll go and meet Hayoung. I'm Odyssey's incarnation, so obviously I should go. That's not right. I'm the foremost expert on all things related to the Demon King of Salvation, so it should be me. Ye Gil-yong, Shin Yu-seung and even Jang Ha-young joined the fray, turning the inside of the hall into pure chaos. Constellations and incarnations were arguing with each other, saying they should be the one to make the trip. Yu Sang-ah sighed while looking at them. It's not as easy as you all think. Everyone here is aware of how dangerous it is to cross a world line, yes. Well, yeah. If the coordinate I traced is correct, then the world line in question is right at the outermost edge of the universe. Outermost edge. Meaning it's a world where scenarios might not even exist. No one knew what the world Kim Dakya had reincarnated into was like. It could be fundamentally different from their Earth. The system's grace could get much weaker when you reach there, which means the powers of both skills and stigmata will naturally weaken as well. The length of the voyage will be quite an ask, too. Anna Croft, listening to the explanation, nodded her head in agreement. She then looked up at the Ark, currently performing a test flight up in the sky. As the vessel has been cobbled together as a single-seater, the equipment installed on board isn't the greatest. Especially when you're crossing the dark stratum, enduring the storm of aftermath will prove to be a massive challenge. Only the person possessing a very powerful mind is qualified. One mistake, and you may even end up as an outer god, that's why. The outer god. That term cast a dark shadow on the expressions of a handful of the companions. They had recalled the sight of hounds chasing after the abyss, doggedly pursuing them, that's why. Unfortunately, Anna Croft wasn't done with her explanation, and there are far too many world lines where his soul has scattered to as well. At the bare minimum, you'll have to cross hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of world lines. Are you prepared for that eventuality? Hundreds of thousands. Even if you were to cross one world line per day, the trip might end up lasting for hundreds of years with that estimate. Even if it was for Kim Dakya, could anyone be able to last that lengthy period of time without losing their sanity? None of you are capable. The man who could survive even when receiving the absolute minimum grace of the system. The man who would not lose himself even when swimming against the boundless torrents of time. And that's why, the man with the highest odds of succeeding in this mission among the companions. I'll be the one to head out. The Ark's passenger had already been decided. Eventually, the Ark's date of departure had arrived. Han Soo-young observed Yu Young-hyo, currently getting ready to disembark from some distance away. I'm not putting on that thing. Conquering King, you must wear it. Don't forget that you're no longer the same as your past self. Now, this was a spectacle she would have liked to show to Kim Dakya of 5 years ago. If he heard about how the prophet was trying to ensure the safety of the regressor, just what would be the thoughts entering his mind? You're really becoming a bother. You might be saying that now, but this will definitely come in handy later on. Being a transcender does not mean you're completely free from the system's influences. Transcenders are existences validated only through their opposition to the system. If the latter disappears, then the former's powers will, of course, grow progressively weaker in turn. Yu Young-hyo glared at Anna Croft with disapproving eyes, before putting on the offered equipment one by one. This is a cumbersome attire for combat. You are not going there to fight, so it'll be fine. Yu Young-hyo's new bloated appearance after putting on the spacesuit was truly a sight to behold. Han Soo-young began teasing him. That look really suits you. You're being noisy. You should think this over. You really want to do this. Even as the departure time crept ever closer, Han Soo-young still didn't feel confident at all. Honestly speaking, maybe there was no reason to go this far. The voyage about to take place this time was completely different from the regression or jumping between the world lines. They weren't trying to change the past, nor were they trying to steal the right materials to open the final wall of the other world line. This voyage, in some ways, was much closer to a pilgrimage, one where he was trying to commemorate that one person they had been searching for all this time. Hand over the manuscript. Your manner of speech hasn't changed even though you stopped being a regressor. Han Soo-young sighed and opened her right hand. The power of a stigma she had been developing until now was circling around the tip of her hand. Stigma Cloud System is on standby. This was a similar method to how the fourth wall handed the text files over to Kim Dok-ya in the past. The stigma itself was evolved from her predictive plagiarism, capable of sending obtuse messages across the world lines. It's possible for those possessing this stigma to share the manuscript. Coming back to Earth several times for the new versions will be too difficult even for you, so I'll just keep sending you the manuscripts through the cloud. Are you telling me to learn your unique stigma? We don't have the time to. Right, we don't have the time, but there is a way to learn it super fast. You don't have a constellation backer anymore, do you? Right away, Yu Young-hyuk realized what Han Soo-young was saying. You fool, are you really? You think I'm enjoying the idea myself? While furrowing his brows, he accessed his attribute window. When his stigma regression vanished, his constellation sponsor had disappeared as well. Sponsor none. He was a completely free man. Are you suggesting that I take on someone weaker than me as my backer? But I won against you the last time. I don't understand the rubbish you're spewing. What, you want to have another go? Even though they didn't concede an inch and continued to bicker, they still finished signing the sponsor contract. Both of them knew this was the most optimum method available, that's why. Constellation, architect of the false last act, has become Incarnation, Yu Young-hyuk's constellation backer. Incarnation, Yu Young-hyuk, has inherited the stigma cloud system. Two beings, imaginary cloud network have been connected. I've never imagined that I'd live long enough to see the day like this one. I wish I could tell that idiot Kim Dok-ya about this somehow, muttered Han Soo-young. Once I make my way back, I'll kill you first and cancel this ridiculous contract. Try it if you can. After their exchange came to an end there, they stared at each other for a little while. Don't forget, you must not destroy the other world line. You just have to spread this story there, so that Kim Dok-ya of that world will get to read it, said Han Soo-young. I know. Don't die. I'll be back soon. He might never come back. Both of them knew that, but no one deliberately tried to bring that point up, with the exception of one person, that was Oppa. The tearful Yu Mia held onto Yu Young-hyuk's spacesuit. You're lying. You aren't going to come back. You can't, even if you wanted to. I won't abandon you and die. As Yu Mia continued to shed her tears, Han Soo-young tightly held her shoulders. Yu Young-hyuk slowly lowered himself and matched his little sister's eye line, then spoke in a gentle, loving tone of voice. I give you my word, I will definitely return. As he turned around to leave, he sent Han Soo-young a message. Look after Mia for me. He didn't look behind once and climbed aboard the final arc. And when Anna Croft gave her signal, the vessel's ignition was turned on. The companions, belatedly hearing about the news, soon arrived and watched everything unfold. The ark slowly rose up to the sky. The voices of the companions wouldn't have been able to enter the vessel's tightly enclosed cockpit. Yijai, breathlessly running over here, looked up at the departing ark. Aren't you going to say goodbye? Han Soo-young asked her. If I do, I feel like it's going to be the last time I see him. Despite saying that, Yijai's eyes were brimming full of tears. Other companions also looked up at the ark without saying anything. Yu Sang-ah broke the silence first. Everything we wanted to say are in the novel anyway. I'm sure Young-hyuk SSI will read it later on. What's the point of him reading it? Hyung reading it, that's all that matters. Yigilyong Shin Yuseung Jiang Hui Wan, Yihyonseong Jang Hyong Yusanga Yisialhwa Yisujong Gong Pildu. And then the constellations, too. Everyone stood there and watched the ark leave. Shin Yuseung asked, "Will Dakya Ajasi really read our story?" That was uncertain. No one in existence would know that. This mission had high odds of failure, and the odds of Yu Jung-hyuk coming back home empty-handed were also very high. And their story could disappear as mere cosmic dust in some distant universe. The departing Yu Jung-hyuk should know about that as well. Even then, he chose to leave. He left for his own sake. Maybe also for other companions, too. "If it's Kim Dakya, he'll read it," replied Han Soo-yong. At the very least, the people of this world would be able to carry on with their lives while waiting for his news, waiting for Yu Jung-hyuk's return. "He made a promise with me, you see." The ark's flames lit up as it reached towards the distant galaxy. The companions endlessly looked on at the ark getting further away, as if it was an expedition ship sailing towards another world. A story written through their lives was disappearing to a place forever out of their reach. The ark is entering the atmosphere. Waiting for the user Yu Jung-hyuk's destination input. Yu Jung-hyuk inputted the coordinates of the world line Yu Sang-a told him. Even the coordinates of the next nearest world line to it was incredibly far away. Just as she said, that place might not have star stream there. The dimensional acceleration will commence. Portion of necessary energy will be substituted by the coins. Coins amassed in the other world line were injected as the energy source of the vessel. They had lost their value with the weakening of the system, but still, they used to be the strongest fable in the world once upon a time. Before long, the planet Earth could no longer be seen. Entering the dark stratum to escape from the world line. Yu Jung-hyuk recalled what Yu Sang-a said. The world line Dakya SSI has reincarnated into is located very far away. Meaning, I don't know how long it will take to get there if you leave the world line through the conventional means. The world Kim Dakya had reincarnated into existed outside the ways of survival, a place that had completely escaped from this world line's influence. More than likely, you'll have to go through the doorway that allows you to leave this world line. How long passed by like this? Things resembling bubbles began appearing far ahead of him. These bubbles of various hues expanded and contracted repeatedly within the ominous currents. He even sensed this faint feeling of foreboding, too. Yu Jung-hyuk knew what caused this feeling. Tsujajachu, the Vice-King of the Outer Gods, as well as the master of the dimensional doorway between the world lines, and the existence that opened the path to the 1863rd turn for Kim Dakya once upon a time. Yu Jung-hyuk unknowingly swallowed back his own saliva. This thing before him possessed more than enough power to make him nervous, the man who managed to clear the scenarios. Youare-Notttheplotter. A massive eye could be seen within the sea of foams. Yu Jung-hyuk increased the speed of the ark, not even trying to dodge that eye. In order to get to the world line at the furthest edge of the universe, he simply had to go through this path. THATIS outside THE story. Doesn't matter, step away or I'll cut you down. Yu Jung-hyuk aroused every bit of his fables and pushed the ark forward. The Vice-King didn't try to stop him. However, it only spoke in a pitying, empty-sounding tone of voice. OTHEONE dreaming OFTHE dream, outside. YOUR dream sia NNOTBEFULFILLED. The moment he collided with the doorway, the view before his eyes completely distorted. He gritted his teeth and fought back against the storm pouncing on him. A violent storm of sparks began ravaging and devouring his entire body. He endured the urge to scream as horrifying pain akin to his whole body, breaking apart, took him over. There's one last thing I wanted to ask you about. Han Soo-yong's voice trickled past inside his disoriented head. Why are you going so far to save Kim Dakya? You've lost many comrades by now already. Having lost many comrades before doesn't mean you become accustomed to the pain of loss. And also, explosions began going off inside the ark. Debris from the broken instruments began floating away in the universe. I have something I need to ask that fool. Yet another explosion resounded out, and an object pierced into Yu Young-hyuk's torso. Failed to read the world line's coordinates. Warning, an error has occurred in the coordinate recognition device. An error has occurred in the interior temperature modulation device. An error has occurred in the ship's navigation system. Sparks exploding abruptly dominated Yu Young-hyuk's entire body. His vision was dyed in pure white, and his consciousness faded away. By the time he managed to open his eyes, he was already lost in space. Epilogue 5, The Eternity in Epilogue 2 Fin. Chapter 548, Epilogue 5, The Eternity in Epilogue 3. Fourth day of drifting. Yu Young-hyuk barely managed to regain his consciousness and discovered a sharp piece of debris stabbing him in his abdomen. He calmly got rid of the debris and checked the status of the vessel's hull. Sixth day of drifting. He realized that the ark had completely lost all its functions. The navigation system was unresponsive, and he couldn't see a single thing nearby. As a matter of fact, he couldn't even see a single planet nearby. 11th day of drifting. With several of the safety systems installed within the ark destroyed, abnormality began manifesting in Yu Young-hyuk's body. System's homeostasis is currently broken. Power of chaos is eroding your entire body. Your fable is crumbling away little by little. Some kind of a problem must have occurred somewhere, because all the abilities realized through the system had become completely paralyzed. Yu Young-hyuk remained calm as he inspected the fables currently with him. Thankfully, his fables were all safe. Fable Hellscape of Eternity is enveloping you. The flames of hell protected him from the bitter coldness. 21st day of drifting. The spacesuit Anna Croft made him wear really did come in handy. If it weren't for the built-in protective functionality of the suit, the rate of his body crumbling away would have been so much faster. Yu Young-hyuk did whatever he could to repair the ark's power source. Although the job performed wasn't of professional quality, the vessel still started moving again. Unfortunately, the collision caused the fuel tank reserved for a rainy day to blow up, and the ark needed his fable energy to operate. He failed to repair the self-navigation system and the autopilot though, meaning he had to pilot the craft personally. 34th day of drifting. He needed to somehow find his original route. 42nd day of drifting. As the days of his fable needing to be exhausted increased, fatigue began accumulating in his body. Instances of him briefly losing his consciousness happened more and more frequently. The darkness was eating away at his mind. Why did I come this far? There were moments when his purpose would become blurry, uncertain. He came this far to carry out his mission, to deliver a story to the reincarnated Kim Dokya, to revive the Kim Dokya his companions remembered. Why though? He still had something he simply had to ask Kim Dokya, that's why. But what was the question? 58th day of drifting. The moment he saw a wan face reflected on the ark's window, Yu Young-hyuk recalled the forgotten question. In a world where the scenarios have come to an end, what should he do to continue living on? That's right, that's what he wanted to ask Kim Dokya, because that guy knew everything. Kim Dokya, always thinking about the end. The man who planned for everything and didn't hesitate to sacrifice his own life to see the conclusion of a certain story. A fool like that should know, he thought. If it was Kim Dokya, then he should know more about Yu Young-hyuk than Yu Young-hyuk knew about himself. That's what the latter thought. The regressor who stopped regressing, just what would become of him? Yijai said that she suffered from nightmares every night. But for him, his life had been a constant nightmare for the longest time. The only reason why he managed to endure until now was because he still had a goal, an aim, which he hadn't achieved yet. However, that goal was now no more, and the scenario had ended as well. The regressor Yu Young-hyuk was free. but as he stood before the hard-earned freedom, he couldn't figure out what exactly he had finally earned. 83rd Day of Drifting. As his directionless drifting went on and on, the fables covering his skin decreased precipitously. The amount of fables scattering into space gradually increased. His voyage continued on, but he didn't even know where he was heading to. 102nd Day of Drifting. Yu Young-hyuk began reading Han Soo-young's novel. He thought that by reading it, he'd be able to endure against time somehow. 111th Day of Drifting. While reading about Kim Dok-ya's story, he began to harbor this faint hint of anticipation. He thought that the Kim Dok-ya from this story should be able to answer his question. From the first episode onwards, he studiously read about Kim Dok-ya's life. Some events he already knew, while some others were unfamiliar to him. He'd stop reading when he reached certain sentences, too. That feeling of being left alone past the full stop of the story, right after the protagonist and the side characters all stepped into the sentence of "everyone lived happily ever after." Struck by the sense of emptiness and betrayal, the young me couldn't fight against the loneliness and writhed around in pain. What was happiness? That term felt so very alien to Yu Young-hyuk. He thought he might have felt such an emotion from somewhere within the memories of the zeroth turn that he managed to steal a glance earlier. However, that was no longer his life. 128th Day of Drifting. To him, the figure of Kim Dok-ya relying on nothing else besides the ways of survival to survive came across as alien. He read many times, yet he just couldn't understand it very well. How could a mere story like this be able to support a life? 154th Day of Drifting. Little by little, Yu Young-hyuk grew accustomed to reading the novel. He even found some passages that he liked reading over and over again. I grabbed the hind leg rich in the perfect amount of fat and bit into the flesh. The gravy gently oozing out from the meat, I closed my eyes, having even forgotten to chew. As I thought, reading about it and actually tasting it are two different things. It was a scene that happened early on, when Kim Dok-ya and the companions had recently entered the scenarios, when they roasted the meat from the mole rats. Yu Young-hyuk pulled out a slice of dried meat from inside his coat underneath the spacesuit and began chewing on it while reading that passage again. He slowly closed his eyes and chewed, and it almost felt as if he was with the companions within the damp darkness of the subway. 155th Day of Drifting. But when he opened his eyes, he was still all alone. Yu Young-hyuk dazedly sitting, there began reading the novel again. 211th Day of Drifting. He continued to read this story all by himself, and 258th Day of Drifting. And read the story again. 279th Day of Drifting. He finally understood Kim Dok-ya just a little. 316th Day of Drifting. Your fables have absorbed your emotions. Every time he read Han Soo-young's novel, the consumed fables would regain their vitality for fleeting moments. Although it couldn't match the speed of consumption, he wouldn't have been able to hold on until now if he didn't read the story. However, he couldn't simply hold on forever. Kim Dok-ya within the novel was saying this. That's why you should have read it until the end, you know. What did it mean to read a story to its end? Although he couldn't fully understand it, Yu Young-hyuk still chose to heed that advice. 333rd Day of Drifting. Abruptly, he realized the reason why his failure was inevitable. Even if you manage to save the world, you still won't be saved. The moment you save the worlds you have cast away would pounce on you. Even if you do save one world, every other world you have forsaken will drag you down to hell. Yu Young-hyuk stared at the distant universe and thought to himself, what could have it been like if this was the first or the second regression turn? What if he had completely forgotten about the memories from his previous lives? If he had no clue whatsoever of the lives from his previous regressions, then maybe, just maybe, couldn't he have found his answer already, instead of wandering aimlessly like this? Maybe he wouldn't have to suffer like this. Could he have finally understood what the happy ending of other stories was like? Could he have moved forward in order to not die? Kugugagugu. The Ark's hull began vibrating. Wondering what was going on, he enhanced his perception to sweep over the surroundings, only to discover a huge horde dyeing the universe ash-gray. They were existences he was quite familiar with. Oh. Existences that were discarded from the world lines and ejected from the scenarios. The enormous waves of outer gods were flooding in his direction. A faint scent of fear could be picked up coming from them. They were being chased by some things. Quaduduk. One of the nameless ones escaping at the rear of the pack was pierced by something. Soon, he spotted the hounds chasing after the abyss, easily numbering thousands chasing down the outer gods, like wolves corralling the flock of sheep. Every time a nameless one was hunted down, an incredible explosion of sparks occurred in between the flood. The storm of energy was gradually growing larger and larger. At this rate, his vessel would get swept up much sooner than later. Save him, save him, save him, save him. Eventually, the front pack of the flood overtook the Ark. The nameless ones desperately ran. The eyes of the creatures resembling cephalopods glanced in Yu Yonghyok's direction. Krayak. A monster's body was pierced through without resistance by the hound's fangs. The pitch-black lump of fable spewing out by the dying monster splattered onto the cockpit's window like paint. The cephalopod monster was staring at him in resentment as it fell. Yu Yonghyok had seen those eyes before, once upon a time. If so, what about the people who are different from me? What about Jaihai Iani, Hyunseong Opa, and Cialhwa Iani? Those who fought only for your sake, just who were they to you? Right at that moment, Yu Yonghyok thought he could finally understand what his black square was. He understood how a regressor finished with his regressions should carry on living. He understood the true conclusion he was supposed to reach. From the very beginning, such a thing could never be determined by his own will alone. The Ark's cockpit is opening. The moment he opened the cockpit, the hounds began rushing in his direction. Yu Yonghyok gripped the dark heavenly demon sword in reverse and cut the head off of a hound. The waves from the other world splitting apart brushed past while clawing at him. What? Yuara. He watched the nameless ones flood past him and recalled the story he had been reading not too long ago. Maybe Han Suyong knew about it already. You wrote my story. In that case, you should also know where my story is supposed to end. She probably knew the truth that this story would never reach the reincarnated Kim Dokjas. That was why he must never return to Earth. He must never let his companions know of his survival. His absence must become their eternal hope. And maybe that was the fitting final verse to the regressor who had destroyed countless worlds. As he continued to smack away the pouncing hounds, Yu Yonghyok thought about the disappearing story. Be gone! His lion-like roar using magical energy as the foundation caused the hounds hiding in between the outer gods to raise their heads. These hounds then formed lines and attacked Yu Yonghyok simultaneously. His arms were punctured, and the protective equipment worn over his legs were torn off from him. Fables began leaking out from the ripped-open gaps of the tattered spacesuit. Bit by bit, he was losing his strength. His lengthy regression journey. Yu Yonghyok instinctively realized that this was his conclusion. This is the end I wish to see. It could have been a slightly more excellent conclusion. If he had made a different choice back then, or maybe, if he chose to go down the better direction then. Yu Yonghyok smiled bitterly. In the end, he remained a regressor even until his final moment. He knew it. He knew there was no better conclusion than this. He knew that, regardless of what choices he might have made in different moments of his life, he'd still end up regretting something about them. Even then, he'd regret and eventually repeat the result of all his regretting. Hoo. That was the summary of his life. I'm Yu Yonghyok. At least a handful of people would be saved by his life. Quiet. Thousands upon thousands of hounds pounced in his direction. As if he was atoning for his sins, Yu Yonghyok wielded his sword and wielded it some more. With each and every one of his attacks, those nameless ones with forgotten names received their salvation. Coldness began circulating in his entire body. The amount of fable leaking out from the tattered spacesuit continued to increase. He felt dizzy and his vision flickered. Yu Yonghyuk squeezed out every last drop of magical energy. Breaking the Sky Swordsmanship. Destruction Technique. Breaking the Sky Meteor Strike. The vicious, violent fragments of the sword fell like a meteor shower and penetrated the hounds. However, some hounds managed to evade the sword's strike and continued to run towards him. KRRRRRNG. Right next second, something collided with his head and the helmet protecting his face broke into pieces. Warning, your fable is scattering away. Return to the Ark immediately. Your fable is. Adrift droplets of blood were freezing up. Hounds were tearing into his entire body, and the story Han Soo-young had written were breaking apart among the torn, ripped fable fragments scattering away. Miyaya. Fables kept scattering away like stardust. Yu Yonghyuk watched that spectacle and quietly thought about the lonely space no one would ever imagine. The nameless ones were witnessing his final moments with their empty eyes. This story they had compiled would be forgotten sooner or later. It became a story no one would read. Yu Yonghyuk summoned the last vestiges of his strength and gripped the hilt of the sword tightly. He stabbed the neck of the hound, biting his thigh, and cut apart its body. A regressor might only know how to regret, but he'd never give up. Maybe this regression turn you are about to abandon could be the one single turn, where you might get to witness the end of this world as a human being, you know. The one and only way for him to live on as a human being. And that was to never give up on this story. Quaduduk. Something bit his neck, and his vision was dyed crimson in color. His eyes slowly closed. This really was his final moments. Tsuchachu. However, he saw the darkness before his eyes distort as his vision gradually blurred. Was he hallucinating? Something was standing over there. The ends of the black coat were seemingly dancing within the pure white fable fragments. What a pitiful sight this is, the third turn. Someone was talking to him from there. This will be my last time helping you. Epilogue 5, The Eternity and Closing Verse 3 Fin. Chapter 549, Epilogue 5, The Eternity and Epilogue 4. Yu Yonghyuk dreamed a particular dream. It was about the time he participated in the Journey to the West scenario with the rest of the Kim Dokya Company members. In the dream, he was running on top of the Tangshan River's surface. He could see the figures of Jiang Hui-1, Yu Sang-a, Yi Hyun-seong, and Shin Yu-seung running next to him. Not. Yogos were screaming out their death throes repeatedly. His memories grew clearer and clearer. Right, they were participating in the journey to the West in order to rescue Kim Dokya. But then where was Kim Dokya? Tsujachachu. What a pathetic sight this is. With only this much, you actually dared to come out to the outside of the story. A voice could be heard coming from somewhere. I was wondering why dangerous fable ripples could be detected in the vicinity, but he was the cause then. What are we going to do, Captain? We decided not to interfere anymore, right? Are you really going to help him? Voices that were familiar, yet also quite foreign to him. Was this a part of his memories? Who could have said those words? Suddenly, the front of his eyes seemed to get darker, only to reveal a pitch-black shadow standing there and blocking the light. An outer god stood in the middle of the dim shadows. Even without consciously realizing it, Yu Yonghyuk began emitting fighting intent. Right, he did fight against this bastard back then, too. The other him who had witnessed the world's end after living through 1863 regressions, the secretive plotter. Even before Yu Yonghyuk could use a skill, though the secretive plotter spoke up first. Did you really think the end of a regressor will be that easy? The Tangshan River was upturned. Yogos rising up from every corner of the river's surface pounced on Yu Yonghyuk. The discarded stories clung onto his body all at the same time. The forgotten fables were being sucked into his mouth and nose. He gradually sank beneath the water as the head-wrecking pain swallowed him up. Do not forget, we aren't even permitted the luxury of death. With that true voice as the signal, his view was flipped around. Yu Young-hyuk woke up heavily panting as if he was vomiting out the river's water. Yogos that clung onto him in the dream were nowhere to be seen now, having disappeared to somewhere unknown. However, someone else's presence could be felt instead. Phew, you really shocked me there, making me think you were dead and all. A clear, gentle voice greeted him. Yu Young-hyuk shook his still dizzy head. A blurry figure was before his eyes. A warm, caring aura emitted from this silhouette gently wrapped around his entire body. Was he still dreaming? His vision recovered gradually, and the face of the blurry figure could finally be seen. Yu Young-hyuk hurriedly rubbed his eyes without even realizing it. Was he hallucinating instead? This young girl's external appearance resembled Kim Dak-ya's somehow. Her eyes sparkling like stars were quietly observing him. I didn't expect to see you here, Captain. You probably can understand now how I felt while wandering around the world lines. Right. This child, you don't have to worry. I've already repaired most of your scattered fable, you see. And just in case, I've even started a sub-scenario so you should be fine for the time being. Could she be? That's so disappointing. Do I have to speak like this for you to recognize me? As the girl smiled mischievously, a small horn suddenly grew out of her head. Her lips parted a little, and a familiar cry he'd been missing for so long jumped out. But has Master got in touch yet? Nope, I'm sure he's taking good care of things, replied Han Soo-young. It had already been 3 months since Yu Young-hyuk left on his voyage. The work on the manuscript continued on without a hitch, and the updates were continuously being sent through the cloud system. Number of file downloads, 0. However, Yu Young-hyuk had not logged in once to the cloud system, using the stigma during the past 3 months. Yu Young-hyuk, that idiot, just what is he doing? The ominous foreboding slowly mushroomed in Han Soo-young's heart. She even began thinking that maybe she should have been the one to head out. Yu Mia was next to her, sweating profusely while performing a series of press-ups. I'll become strong enough to break both of my oppa's legs. Han Soo-young looked at Yu Mia and the girl's blazing eyes, and could only nod her head as a sign of encouragement. And how long did she tap on the keyboard afterwards? Suddenly, a message entered her head. Your incarnation has logged into the cloud system. After Biyu heard about the general gist of the situation, she responded in the following manner. Okay, so, you'll spread the story you receive via Han Soo-young's stigma to other world lines. That's the core of the plan, right? Correct. And you're hoping that the reincarnated versions of Dakya Ajasi will read that story. Also correct. Not bad. To think that you'd come up with a plan to take advantage of the most ancient dream's nature like this. I also thought it's not a bad-sounding P. Did you really think I'd be impressed by that plan? How did you even cook up such a harebrained scheme seriously? Was Biyu's personality originally like this? But then again, Captain, you're completely capable of doing something this crazy without batting an eyelid. Yu Young-hyuk frowned deeply at that somewhat mocking tone of voice. The more he heard her talk, the more she began sounding like Kim Dak-ya for some reason. The odds of success are not very good, you know. I know. The most ancient dream of that world line might not even read the story. And the more advanced a civilization is, the less important the contents made up purely of letters becomes. So you may not even get a chance to approach such a world, too. Before that, crossing the world lines is the biggest problem. Yu Young-hyuk stared at the half-destroyed ark. Although he got lucky with Biyu's help and managed to survive, it was impossible to visit other world lines without the vessel. Biyu thought about something for a while, then spoke what's in her mind. Why can't you go? What are the coordinates? Give to me. With a slightly unconvinced face, Yu Young-hyuk handed over the list of coordinates Yu Sang-ah gave him earlier. Biyu confirmed all the world lines on it and smiled refreshingly. You do know who I am, right? I'm none other than the Dakibai King, you know. It was right then. Yu Young-hyuk recalled an obvious fact. The final arc was an item belonging to the Bureau, and the top representative of the Bureau was precisely the Dakibai King. Can you guess what I had been doing in the dark stratum? While you and other companions went to the 1865th turn, I too had been working my butt off somewhere. That's what. The deep, boundless wisdom could be sensed behind Biyu's eyes, drawing a smiling arc. The dark stratum, a place where the time's density was far greater than any other spacetime. Just how long had Biyu been staying in such a space? She pulled out a Weni pouch from her inner pocket and continued on. I've got my hands on the dead Weni King's dimensional doorway, so jumping to the nearest world line isn't going to be a problem at all. As for those in the far-flung distance, well, it should be doable after repairing the arc a bit, I think. The problem is with the energy to be used as the fuel. Yu Young-hyuk looked down at his own incarnation body. Thanks to Biyu saving his life, most of his injuries had been healed, but the majority of his fables were left badly mangled after they protected him for over 300 days of adrift at space, as well as during the battle against the hounds. I guess that's also been sorted out now too. So, he wasn't sure how it happened, but his inside was overflowing with fables. A truly extraordinary amount of fables were writhing around within him, getting ready to be unleashed. Just where did you acquire the fables of the nameless ones? Not only that, such a humongous amount too. Fables that had been discarded by the scenario was now trying to speak to him. Fables with unknown names from outer gods wished to accompany you. Fables from the nameless ones he had run across in the final scenario once upon a time. Existences born in a place no stars paid attention to, and who had to die in a place no one was looking at. They were currently talking to Yu Young-hyuk. Fables with unknown names are picking up the scent of an ancient dream from you. Now that I think about it, something felt a bit off when I was picking you up. The nameless ones that didn't possess any ego were busy protecting you, you know. Yu Young-hyuk recalled the dream he had not too long ago, the journey to the West scenario, the voices of the secretive plotter, as well as the 999th turn's individuals. But it couldn't be. He hurriedly enhanced his perception, but couldn't detect anything. While listening to Biyu's voice, Yu Young-hyuk quietly observed the view of the space spreading out like an endless ocean. By using those fables as our fuel, we shouldn't have any problems traveling long distances. Okay, let's get a move on then. The hound's territory is nearby, so if we take our time lounging around here, things might get dicey again. Since Yu Young-hyuk had no thoughts of encountering those hounds again, he quickly nodded his head as well. It's a bit cramped inside for two people, so bad. Pure white and abundant fur sprouted from Biyu's body. Then she suddenly shrunk down to the size of a single fist. Dakibai King Biyu has started the Ark's voyage. Along with that message, the Ark's main engine came to life. The vessel left behind the blue-hued fable traces and disappeared from there in the blink of an eye. A short while later, 5 shadows appeared near where the Ark used to be. Do you think he'll succeed? That's uncertain. However, this is as far as we can help him. Let's hurry up and return, shall we? Today's the parents' day at school, after all. By the way, who agreed to go with Dakya? Me. You idiot obviously aren't qualified. The secretive plotter watched the Ark disappearing beyond the distant galaxy and murmured out. I pray that we don't have to run into each other again, Yu Young-hyuk. Jang Ha-yong, working on the revision of the second act, yawned grandly in boredom and asked a question. By the way, Han Soo-yong, can I ask you something? No. What did you tell Yu Young-hyuk regarding the method of delivering the manuscript? Jang Ha-yong spoke in a tone of voice indicating her distrust of the man in question. I took a look, and well, besides him knowing how to play games, he didn't seem to know his way around a computer, you know. Would he even know how to upload novels to a website? He can't personally serialize the novel. That would mean he'd be stuck in a world line for too long. What then? Han Soo-yong thought about it for a second, then muttered out. The most ideal way would be to find someone who can serialize it for us. The planetary system Z865123, in the year 2020 of the imperial calendar. On that day, a web novel writer named Lee Hak-hyun was busy writing up his manuscript inside a one-room flat for students, only to get into a verbal tussle with his editor over the phone. Author Nim, just what are you planning to write this time? What's the title of the novel? It's The Me-Sword Master. The Me-Sword Master, what is it about? Okay, so, the protagonist is a method actor in a fantasy world, and he eventually masters his acting skills and also becomes a swordmaster. Ah, I see. That's enough. By the way, didn't I tell you many times before to never start with the line imperial calendar this and that? Lee Hak-hyun listened to the editor's voice, continuing on for a long while afterwards, and his expression became gloomier and gloomier. Have you forgotten what happened with your previous novel? Author Nim, please think about this carefully. I beg of you. Lee Hak-hyun recalled his previous outputs. His debut work, Orc Philosopher, completely tanked with a pathetically embarrassing score. This novel's paywalled chapters were bought only by his best friend and no one else besides. And the follow-up he wrote with much fanfare, How to Become a Famous Author, also tanked pretty hard because, well, he was not a famous author to begin with. And just like that, this was his third try. Those who will succeed, while those who won't. I'm the latter, I guess. He was 3 months behind on his rent, and with what little money he had on him, it'd be difficult to even buy tonight's dinner. Lee Hak-hyun stared at the empty Korean word processor page before rushing up to the rooftop of the building. The ground, as seen from the 5th floor, looked pretty far enough. Now, even then this is Hawa, NG. Lee Hak-hyun rubbed his eyes. Was he hallucinating? Something was wavering before his eyes. What's going on, my tears? A man was standing there. Not just any man, but an incredibly handsome dude wearing a black coat, no less. And a figurine with fluffy fur was sitting on this man's shoulder. Even a blind could see that this guy was someone extraordinary. He'd be pretty much perfect as a protagonist from a novel, in a way. You over there, you seem to be a web novel author. The black coat-wearing man's powerful aura caused Lee Hak-hyun's legs to tremble even unbeknownst to himself. The latter managed to eke out a reply. Why, yes, I am. In that case, you should know how to serialize a novel then. Well, it was at that moment that a realization dawned on Lee Hak-hyun. He'd heard about this weird rumor from someone, somewhere, a legendary tale of those authors who mysteriously vanished from the world, only to triumphantly return with stunning epics in tow. The tale of incredible luck that only a select handful of writers are blessed with. Lee Hak-hyun realized what kind of a situation this was, and his shoulders began trembling. Is this the chosen author cliché? If all the web novels he had read so far had some dose of reality in them, then that black coat-wearing man should take Lee Hak-hyun into the world of a novel. And then, he'd ask the latter to fix the conclusion written by another writer. The latter would utilize his brain honed by clichés to its fullest extent and go on to perform truly fantastical feats. Yes, I know how to do it. I shall change your world's future. Please hurry and take me with you. I may look like this, but I'm a pro web novel author with prior experience in paid serialization. A dull thud rang out as something hit the back of Lee Hak-hyun's head. He blacked out immediately. Wait a minute, Captain. What are you doing knocking the guy out? Bu cried out sharply. They were currently in the planetary system Z865123. They had to go through no less than 17 layers of dark stratum. From Earth, they had been living in to barely reach this world line. It couldn't be helped, he was too talkative. Now what are we going to do? Yu Young-hyuk began pulling out several instruments from his inner pocket. From now on, we need to forcibly insert the novel Han Soo-young has written into this man's brain. What are you talking about? Do you even know how long that will take? Are you going to brainwash people like this every time you enter a new world line? That is. When he thought about it, He realized that this method could only take them so far. They couldn't stick around and keep their eyes on this man forever, and the brainwashing could stop working after Yu Jung-hyuk had left this world line. You said that Han Soo-young hadn't finished writing the novel yet, right? We don't have the time to visit this world again later. At this rate, even if we hand over the novel, the serialization might stop in the middle, you know. Han Soo-young, that fool. Stop blaming someone else and activate that thing called cloud system or something. Hurry. Since she sounded as if she had a plan here, Yu Jung-hyuk didn't argue and did as he was told. Sync your display with mine. Bu then began browsing and poking at the cloud system, files floating up before her eyes. Soon, her hand stopped moving before a specific file. Docubai King, Bu, is trying to approach the cloud system using the authority of the Bureau. Will you allow the access to the portion of the files? Yu Jung-hyuk clicked on the confirmation icon. When he did, a transparent thread extended out from the file and got connected to the head of the unconscious web novel writer. Docubai King Bu has exercised her authority and altered the cloud system. The system's influence is minimal in this worldview. Additional probability will be consumed. The setup inspiration sharing has been created. Bu wiped away the strands of sweat from her forehead and spoke. I've synchronized the cloud's files with this guy's subconsciousness. From now on, the stories Han Soo-young writes in the future will be updated automatically to this guy's subconscious mind. Now that was a truly stunning fable manipulation ability. Even Han Soo-young needed quite a lot of time to create a single stigma, so this. Yu Jung-hyuk asked her, is this method safe? What if this fool unnecessarily starts suspecting something? Suspect? Not very likely. No, he's gonna love the change, actually. I mean, he's being showered by inspirations, so which writer wouldn't welcome that with open arms? He'll definitely believe that he's the one writing this story. Bu smirked and looked down at the still unconscious man. Yu Jung-hyuk alternated his gaze between such Bu and the unmoving web novel writer as a strange little thought crept into his mind. Could it be that a novel, any novel, was written like this to begin with? Bu lightly knocked on the head of the unconscious writer and spoke. He will probably think that a muse came to bless him or something. When Lee Hak-hyun opened his eyes again, he found himself slumped over his own desk. Was I dreaming? Erg. He slowly got up and wiped his mouth, then began massaging his temples. That was one strangely vivid dream. A dream where he was being threatened by a man wearing a black coat. And then, there was a figuring floating in the air, seemingly made out of a lump of wool. It seemed rather likely that, him secluding himself in this small room for too long while attempting to write something, had finally pushed him over the edge. Lee Hak-hyun spat out a long groan and switched on the once empty notebook screen, but on it was. There are 3 ways to survive in a ruined world. A sentence he didn't remember typing was there. On top of this, his hands were actually moving on their own to continue typing away. My ancient smartphone displaying the web novel platform struggled to move through the screen. I scrolled down, then up. How many times did I do that, I wondered. Really? Is that really the end? No. Lee Hak-hyun looked at his hands typing away at a frightening turn of speed and began wondering if he had finally lost his mind. Hell, he thought that he could even hear some sort of a voice coming from within his mind, too. You tanked badly the last time by making the author the protagonist. How about making the reader the protagonist this time around? Kim Dokya, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. My father wanted me to become a tough man even if I was left alone, so he gave me such a name. When he typed one sentence, another one would pop up in his head, and when he finished typing that one, yet another would appear in his mind. Inspiration surged in him like a powerful waterfall. By the time he regained his wits, he had already completed the prologue as well as the first chapter. This was the moment when my life's genre had changed. Lee Hak-hyun dazedly stared at the screen for a long time before calling the editor on the phone. Editor Nim, it looks like I might become successful after all. Epilogue 5, The Eternity in Epilogue 4, Fin. Chapter 550, Epilogue 5, The Eternity in Epilogue 5. It had been 1 year and 2 months since Yu Yonghyuk had left on his journey. The speed of the manuscript being updated started slowing down around the time the third part was nearing completion. Even though the manuscript was still being compiled diligently, there were just too many voids yet to be filled up. As the chapter number got higher and higher, stories Han Soo-young didn't know of seemed to also increase in number, as well. This might prove to be helpful, at least by a little bit, said Aileen. If she didn't extract fable fragments from the sleeping Kim Dak-ya, the work on the manuscript would have slowed down even further. Fable fragment, Great Adventure in the Dark Castle, has been successfully extracted. Fable fragment, Memories of 1863rd Regression Turn, has been successfully extracted. Fable fragment, Gourmet Association Story, has been successfully extracted. These fragments were stories too small to become fables. Han Soo-young read these fragments and filled in the previously lacking inside of Kim Dak-ya. Even then, far too many parts remained empty. She didn't try to forcibly fill those voids, however. Your incarnation has logged into the cloud system. Yu Sang-ah asked. It looks like Yonghyuk SSI is doing well. Well, he's probably busy scaring the living daylights out of the poor web novel authors, replied Han Soo-young. I'm curious about what other authors are like. Surely, not everyone is like you, Soo-young SSI. Well, no, not everyone's like, hey, did you come here just to grind my gears? The author in question may not even be a person when I think about it. It could be a highly developed AI or... Han Soo-young reluctantly nodded her head. Indeed, the universe was vast and lots of writers existed out there. And also, writers who got a beating from Yu Yonghyuk should be plenty too. In any case, judging from how timely the revised manuscript was being downloaded, that dude must have been doing his job properly so far. But then, your incarnation is revising the manuscript you have written. What? Captain, what are you doing? I'm fixing the incorrect portion. Yu Yonghyuk was in the midst of revising the updated file in real time while logging into the cloud system. Originally, it was impossible for an incarnation like him to revise a file updated to the cloud system. But your attributes effects are activating. You can now revise the cloud system's manuscript. Revision of the already recorded contents requires a great amount of probability. But it became possible to do so from some time ago. He couldn't quite remember just when it started, but it might have been when the attribute related to writing sleeping inside him began manifesting its powers. Maybe it had bloomed into life after acquiring the fables of the outer gods. Won't Han Soo-young get really angry? Even if it's her, she wouldn't have known every story there is. Some parts especially were in a total mess. While saying that, Yu Yonghyuk tapped away on the holographic keyboard. Bu seemed rather impressed by this scene and spoke up. Oh, Captain, your grammar is better than I thought. Since you liked swinging swords around every single day, I figured you wouldn't even know the difference between a knight and a knight, but this. It was right at that moment that Yu Yonghyuk's cursor suddenly began jumping around all on its own. Constellation, architect of the false last act, has revised the latest file. Strange words were suddenly typed over the space where Yu Yonghyuk's cursor had been just now. Hey, you just messed with my manuscript, didn't you? Do you really want to die that badly? So, there was such a way to communicate with her then. Yu Yonghyuk calmly typed the following sentence. This is because you failed to store the manuscript properly. What bulldust are you spewing now? There were incorrect parts in the manuscript. I've left my opinions on the file, so confirm them yourself. After typing that, Yu Yonghyuk took another look at the parts he had changed. Yi Gil-yong, wearing the black coat, looked down arrogantly at the world with his star-like sparkling eyes and spoke up. Hey, you sooty bastard, you're so weak. Do you really think this part even makes any sense? Yi Jai-hai, emitting noble ripples of energy like rushing torrents of a massive river, began swinging her sword. Water the Sky Sword Door, True Body Deep Righteousness / Technique, Water the Sky Destroy the Emperor / There is no such sword technique in the Breaking the Sky swordsmanship. Also, all the Hanya letters are incorrect. Han Soo-young was silent for a moment there. What the hell, I don't remember ever typing these sentences before. Wait, these haven't been published yet, right? There are still some time left until the update, so fix them quickly. Yu Young-hyuk could pretty much figure out what happened here. Seriously, those two, with my notebook PC. Undoubtedly, Yi Gil-yong and Yi Jae-hai must have changed the scheduled update file without Han Soo-young's knowledge. Bu observed the sentences hurriedly being revised before their very eyes and spoke up. Looks like you two have become quite close. We're merely communicating like this for the purpose of the mission. Judging from how the revised version continued to be updated, Han Soo-young must have been hard at work trying to reconstruct Kim Dok-ya's story in the most preserved, complete state. This novel would become divorced from the reality they had to live through when more and more parts of it were filled up via dramatization or imagination. As their goal was to recover Kim Dok-ya, this story had to reflect the reality they had lived in. As long as this is a story, it's impossible to perfectly recreate something. Every story would be distorted by the narrator, after all. I'm aware of that. It'd be the same even if Kim Dok-ya himself personally wrote it. Yu Young-hyuk thought about something related to that for a moment or two. If it was impossible to restore the complete Kim Dok-ya, no matter which story you wrote, then just what was the existence called Kim Dok-ya in the first place? Yu Young-hyuk shook his head. Back then or even now, no one could know that. Well, no one in this world knew who they were exactly after all. He looked at Han Soo-young's manuscript. Those who had forgotten about themselves were probably reading her work right about now. They should be reading this sentence over here, then afterwards, read the one over there next. What Yu Young-hyuk and Han Soo-young wished from them was just one thing, wishing for a happy ending, that they didn't know to become real within someone's imagination. Wishing for the world they had never witnessed before to safely exist somewhere out there in this universe. Constellation, architect of the false last act, has revised the latest file. By the way, Yu Young-hyuk, just how many years have you been wandering? Error has occurred in the cloud system due to incorrect usage. Due to the storm of probabilities aftermath, the stigma will temporarily shut down. It seemed that using the manuscript in this fashion was pushing it a little too far. Yu Young-hyuk slowly raised his head and looked at his face reflected on the ark's window. He could see subtle little premature gray hair spots here and there on his head. Captain, it's not even 100 years yet. I'm aware. The time moves really slowly, doesn't it? Her voice passing them by indifferently caused Yu Young-hyuk to falter just a little. Bu, still in the form of little furball, was staring at the passing scenery of the dark stratum outside with an unreadable expression on her face. Suddenly, he became conscious of her being Shin Yu-seung in her previous life once more. Did you know, Captain? Did you know that I had to endure incredibly difficult years so that I can grant your request? She was an existence who had to wander the world lines as a lost, forgotten being for thousands of years, just to pass on the information to the past regression. Yu Young-hyuk's lips parted and closed several times. He eventually managed to squeeze some words out. It must have been difficult. Right, it was really tough. I resented you a lot too, Captain. The disaster of flood, Shin Yu-seung. The Daki by King Bu used to have such a name once upon a time. Still, these days I feel relieved to have reincarnated, because I got to keep the promise I made with you back then. The promise? Back when I was still Shin Yu-seung, you promised me this, Captain. You said we'd go on a trip together after the scenario comes to an end. While listening to Bu's voice continue on, he began digging through 41st Turn's memories. Maybe it was due to the memories given to him by the secretive plotter. He could just about barely recall some things about that day. Shin Yu-seung, talking to him about what she wanted to do after the scenario had ended. The 41st Turn's Yu Young-hyuk couldn't keep that promise. Shin Yu-seung, you're the last one. His companions died one by one, and during the final moments, he sent Shin Yu-seung away to the outside of the world line. The memories from that day, just where did the moments from that day disappear to? He didn't know. They could have become the nameless ones. Let me say this right now. Don't apologize. The person who should apologize and the person that apology is intended for, they don't exist in this world anymore. She was right. In a way, the person saying it and the person listening right now weren't exactly the right people. Yu Young-hyuk had lost the 41st turn's life, and he had forgotten most of the memories from that period of history ever since Bu reincarnated. It was now just an old story that connected them. They thought about that story for a little while. Shall we get going then? All right. All they could do for now was to complete this lengthy journey, and also to find the suitable intermediary who could deliver their story. This time, the married couple writers over there looked to be good candidates. More than likely, this trip would last for much longer. But Yu Young-hyuk didn't feel that was such a bad thing. As the serialization grew longer and longer in length, the number of episodes that couldn't be filled up only through Kim Dok-ya's fable fragments or interviewing the companions happened more frequently. Yi Gil-yong grumbled unhappily. Can't we, just gloss over it like the last time? Since when did I ever gloss over anything? Yi CLHWA, that thing I asked you about, get it ready. The moment Han Soo-yong finished saying that, Yi CLHWA wheeled in a strange device with multiple suction cups connected to it into the hospital room. Yu Sang-ah spoke up. Isn't that the fable fragment extractor? Yi CLHWA nodded her head. Yes, and from now on we'll start extracting fable fragments from everyone. Our fables. It's possible that you aren't remembering everything, and some could be hidden below your subconsciousness as well. I'm sure you're all aware of it by now, but the majority of a fable is usually accumulated within one's subconsciousness. But it's kinda embarrassing. What if weird fables suddenly pop out? As if she was obviously hopping for that, Han Soo-yong cut in with an evil-sounding voice. Hey, Yi Gil-yong, Yi Jai-hai, you two go first. That caused the do being called out to back away, while hesitating somewhat. Arg, why should I? We already told you everything we know, you know. Right, Nuna? Of course, of course. Completely disregarding whether they did that or not, Han Soo-yong grabbed and shoved them down on some chairs, before placing the suction cups on the duo's heads. Yi Gil-yong freaked out. That feels super weird, you know. Feels like you're putting a plunger on my head. Suja chachu. You hit a hika. Yi Gil-yong's complete fable has been extracted. Fable Demon King Fanatic has started singing. Oh, Odakya Hyung said this back then. I knew it. Even the name of the fable has fanatic in it. Yi Gil-yong didn't say anything as he slumped on the seat. Han Soo-yong narrowed her eyes and glared at the boy, before shifting her glare over to Yi Jai-hai next. With excellent timing, that girl's fable had just been extracted as well. Yi Jai-hai's fable fragment has been extracted. Fable fragment, natural-born bender of facts, has begun its storytelling. Oh my, hey, why don't you write the novel instead of me? Yi Jai-hai avoided meeting Han Soo-yong's glare and whistled nervously. You two touch my manuscript again and I'ma kill you dead. You hear me? We won't. Fine. As for the others. Han Soo-yong shook her head grandly, and while holding a suction cup, she turned around, only for Jiang Hui-won carrying a mischievous expression to plonk a suction cup on the former's head first. What the hell, take it off right now. Han Soo-yong's fable fragment has been extracted. Fable fragment, Memories of a Lemon Candy, has begun its storytelling. By the way, I've been sucking on that, you know. Okay, so. You can be so boring sometimes, you know that. Jiang Hui-won spoke up in a teasing tone of voice. Oh ho, would you look at that? Our dear authornim, why did she omit such a delicious scene from the main story, I wonder? Sang-ah SSI, let's try it out ourselves. We need to extract ours quickly so that our dear authornim can finish her manuscript. While Han Soo-young was angrily gnashing her teeth, the rest of the companions put the suction cups on and started with their fable fragment extraction. Yu Sang-a's fable fragment has been extracted. Fable fragment, hard work, sincerity, patience, has been extracted. Was that your family motto? Everyone should learn from Yu Sang-a's example. Additional fable fragment has been extracted from Yu Sang-a. Fable fragment, memories of their first sharp, cold hand-holding, has been extracted. Eyes of Jiang Hui-wan confirming that fable gleamed a little. It was a fable she also knew, that's why. However, there were some people here who didn't know what it was about. Han Soo-young asked, "What's this? You held Kim Dokya's hand before." "I've completely forgotten about it. There was something like that, wasn't there?" "Why did you hold his hand? Are you curious?" "I need to write the novel, so hurry up and spit it out." Next to the duo, Jiang Hui-wan wearing the suction cup on her head smiled at them. "Hey, Han Soo-young, it's not that strange for close comrades to hold each other's hands, right? Why do you react so?" Jiang Hui-wan's fable fragment has been extracted. Fable fragment, I've seen the Demon King of Salvation's Black Flame Dragon, has been extracted. Han Soo-young narrowed her eyes. "Oh, so really close comrades can show each other stuff like that too." "Ha ha ha, well, I think this device has developed some kind of an error." Yi Hyun-seong's fable fragment has been extracted. Fable fragment, I've seen the Demon King of Salvation's Black Flame Dragon, has been extracted. Jiang Hui-wan asked, utterly taken back, "Hyun-seong SSI, why do you also have that fable?" "Hui-wan SSI, have you forgotten? We saw it together, didn't we?" What is it? What did you two see together?" When Jang Hayoung began her nagging, Jiang Hui-wan faltered a bit and started mumbling away about some random stuff in a clearly troubled tone of voice. While the intense scrutiny was focused elsewhere, Han Soo-young sneakily left her spot and approached the fable extractor. For some reason, she seemed deeply anxious. She alternated her gaze between the companions and the extractor with a complicated expression, before cautiously extending her finger towards the device's power button. Jiang Hui-wan belatedly discovered that sight and cried out, "Han Soo-young, what are you doing? You better listen well now so you don't get things mixed up laugh." Analysis on the additional fable fragment of Han Soo-young has been completed. Fable fragment, I burst Demon King's Black Flame Dragon by mistake. Almost at the same time, Han Soo-young switched the device off. "Okay, so the attack from Jian Wukai flew into that place, is that it?" While belatedly typing up the additional contents for the first part, Han Soo-young softly grumbled to herself. "Damn it, what a weird event that was." Her strange-sounding fable almost got discovered by the companions. In any case, she got to write the manuscript largely trouble-free, all thanks to extracting fable fragments from the companions. Here was a novel she wrote while using the definite information as her foundation while omitting those parts she didn't know of. At this point, she wasn't even sure whether to call this a novel or an essay. Foo! As the work inched closer to the latter half, the shades of pain began creeping up on the companions' expressions. The memories of their happier times would eventually end up as the conclusion they had to face. An ending where all of their effort had turned into nothing more than bubbles, and Kim Dokya failing to return to their side. Yi Gil-yong asked, "What meaning is there in writing a tragedy like this?" "There is some. They might have failed in changing anything, but that didn't mean they had given up. That fact alone was enough to console someone, even if that someone happened to be themselves." And so, around the time when another 8 months had gone by, Han Soo-young managed to write her way past the 4th and 5th part to reach the epilogue. And as the feelings of liberation and heightened excitement enveloped her, she began to work on the final part of the manuscript. The applicable world line system has reached the limits of its senescence. It was also then that something no one could have foreseen happened. Every system in the applicable world line is entering the extinction phase. What? Stigma cloud system has ceased to function. Epilogue 5. The Eternity in Epilogue 5 Fin. Chapter 551. End. Epilogue 5 The Eternity in Epilogue Complete. Upload the file to the cloud. Han Soo-young hurriedly checked her stigma several times at that sudden message. However, it showed no signs of activating. It was as if the system's blessings had disappeared, and for sure, her body started to feel different from a little while ago. Her body that felt like it could fly to anywhere was now getting gradually heavier and heavier. Could it be? No, hang on a second. She figured that a day like this would come eventually, but it happened far quicker than she bargained for. The Bureau's fable, in your possession, has stopped its storytelling. Han Soo-young hadn't even written the novel's final episode yet, either. Besides, if the cloud system was no more, even if she did finish writing the manuscript, transmitting it would still be impossible. God admits. Right then, someone hurriedly shoved open the hospital room's door and rushed inside. Han Soo-young. It seemed that her companions had also realized the severity of the situation. There's no way whatsoever, seriously. For the time being, yes. Devices that operated through magical energy were grinding to a halt one by one. Thanks to that, Yisial-Hwa's hospital was urgently swapping out the power source for the various medical equipment at the moment. What about Kim Dokya's condition? Thankfully, there don't seem to be any complications so far. Although the power of the system had vanished, the sleeping Kim Dokya was still the same. A boy quietly slumbering away, neither alive nor dead. And this very boy's other reincarnated souls living in various parts of the world lines should be reading the manuscript she had written. I couldn't update the last bit of the manuscript. At this rate, Han Soo-young muttered out. The most ancient dreams might not get to read the last part of the story then. Yu Sang-a's observation caused Yi Jai-hai and Jang Ha-young to cry out one after the other. What will happen now? Wasn't the last part of the manuscript the most important bit? What about my side story? That's not really important, is it? They didn't know how many world lines Yu Jung-hyuk had paid pilgrimage to so far, but still, quite a high number of worlds should have seen the publication of the novel to the latest chapter by now. Arg, the one thing I hate so much in this world is a novel that gets dropped in the middle. The final part of the novel, its epilogue, was all about the thing that hasn't happened yet, to the most ancient dream. Quite obviously, there was simply no way that all of them could perfectly imagine a story that hadn't happened yet. What should we do? You said that the last episode is the most crucial one. We still have one more method. Han Soo-young, chewing on her fingers, looked up to the heavens and spoke. There is one more person who can fix the manuscript beside me, and we don't have a choice but to believe in him. The manuscript stopped updating. The manuscript was updated roughly once a day without fail, but for the last month or so, the updates had completely stopped coming. At first, he thought this was an error arising from him traveling between the world lines far too frequently, but when he took a closer look, even the login history itself was gone. Captain, I think something has gone wrong somewhere. He had two theories. One, Han Soo-young found herself in a situation where she couldn't write the manuscript anymore. Or two, Earth's system had finally ground to a halt. Whatever the case might be, this was not a good situation. Files are being automatically transmitted to the connected world lines. The manuscript's latest chapter had been transmitted to other world lines already. In the world where the serialization started first, the notice for postponement had been issued already. What happened was that the author panicked when he suddenly couldn't think of the story and hastily announced the postponement. The situation was not good. At this rate, authors losing their composure might start cooking up their own take on the part Han Soo-young had failed to write and upload. Captain, there isn't much time. Yu Jung-hyuk looked down at both of his hands. He then slowly clenched his fists before unfurling them. It wasn't as if there were no other options available. If Han Soo-young was not in a situation to finish the manuscript, then the person who could had to complete it. Attribute's effect has been activated. You can now edit the manuscript in the cloud system. A lot of probability is required for the editing of the manuscript. Yu Young-hyuk slowly closed his eyes before opening them again. 2 months passed by after the system had entered the dissolution sequence. The system that started crumbling away didn't show any signs of mending itself. The number of people who could hear the messages gradually decreased. Also, skills and stigmata started disappearing one by one. Even the voices of the fables couldn't be heard anymore. An airliner operating on magic energy engines has crashed in the East Sea. Artifacts from the bygone world that hadn't been replaced yet began causing problems as well. Arg, that's why I told them to replace all of that stuff. Jiang Huiwen, watching the news on the screen, finally blew her top. Han Soo-young asked her, who went over there. Jai Hai and the kids. Although pretty weak, they can still activate their stigmata, so. The two of them watched the live broadcast of the rescue attempt. The screen now displayed the figures of Yi Jai Hai, Yi Gil-yong, and Shin Yu-seung, as well as their turtle ship and chimera dragon, both of which were a lot smaller than before. The waves are too strong. Survivors were continuously extracted and rescued one at a time, but the incoming waves were getting rougher by the second as well. The chimera dragon and the turtle ship tottered precariously. The rescue operation continued on despite the rough, inclement weather, but the situation didn't seem optimistic at the moment. Han Soo-young, unable to look on anymore, stood up from her seat. Call Yu Sang-ah right now and get a helicopter ready. It's gonna be impossible for those three alone. I already did, but due to the storm. Han Soo-young quietly spat out, damn it, and began packing her stuff. Breaking news, just in. An unidentified flying object has broken into the East Sea's atmosphere and entered the. Inside the screen, they could now see an object flying in through the pitch-black storm clouds. Accompanied by a massive explosion noise, a distant spot in the ocean was enveloped in bright light. Drones broke past the winds and waves to fly there and continued to transmit real-time footage from the nearby ocean. Soon, the exterior of the flying object was revealed among the pulsating gray foams. It was a capsule-shaped ark, and someone was standing up from within it. Yu Young-hyuk. After confirming the news, Han Soo-young and the rest of the companions all rushed to the East Sea. All of the injured survivors have been safely rescued with help from the alien being. The alien in question has been identified as the terror suspect who had left Earth 2 years ago. Breaking news continued to inundate the airwaves. How long did they wait by the docks? Finally, the rescue ships approaching the port could be seen in the distance, Yi Jai Hai's turtle ship occupying the central position in the formation. She and the kids were waving their hands. And right behind them was a man looking at the dock and at his companions. You. It was an unfamiliar sight. Although his face hadn't changed a lot, his disheveled hair sported several gray spots now. Been a while, said Yu Young-hyuk. Han Soo-young paused, not knowing what to say before shooting back reflexively at him. What about the mission? Why have you come back so soon? She knew full well she shouldn't have said that. The length of time Yu Young-hyuk must have endured should not be simplified with such words. Yu Young-hyuk replied, I had no choice but to return. Oh bye. Yu Mia ran in from behind the group and jumped into his embrace. He gently held her as she sobbed non-stop. Han Soo-young quietly observed the scene before asking him, Who's the girl you brought with you? That prompted the girl behind Yu Young-hyuk to peek her head out and say something. Seriously, you too? No one recognizes me. The girl grandly sighed out and muttered as if she was tired of doing this. Bah. Yu Sang-ah personally went to fetch the companions with her limousine. During the transit, as Yi Clhwa performed the medical checkup on him, Yu Young-hyuk began recounting all the events that had happened to him. From the moment of leaving Earth, lost and drifting between the world lines, receiving help from the outer gods, meeting Biyu in the dark stratum, and to eventually completing his trip around the world lines. You had no choice but to return because you ran out of fable energy. That's right. It seemed that the dissolution of the system had affected Yu Young-hyuk in outer space, as well. In other words, this was the worst possible situation that could happen. Just how long were you out there in space? Are you curious? A faint smile-like expression floated up on Yu Young-hyuk's lips before vanishing completely. As that was a rather un-Yu Young-hyuk-like behavior, Han Soo-young ended up frowning deeply. You actually smiled. Rest easy. I've already visited all the world lines that I could have gone to. With BU's help, a link that updates in real time has been established, so the authors of those world lines should be uploading the novel in the correct sequence. The companions eavesdropping, all breathed a sigh of relief at Yu Young-hyuk's words. However, one important point still remained. Did you transmit everything? What about the last part of the manuscript? What did you do with the final episode? Han Soo-young asked. Are you talking about the part you didn't send to me? That's right, the last part of the manuscript that you could have fixed. Han Soo-young finally exploded in impatient anger. You also have a writer's attribute, right? If you've been reading my novel from the start, you should at least be able to guess how the conclusion is supposed to unfold, right? NG. So, did you write it? You did write it instead of me, right? Yu Young-hyuk wordlessly stared at Han Soo-young. How long passed by like this? He quietly shifted his gaze outside the window. Han Soo-young's voice began trembling. You couldn't have. Do you believe that I should have written it? What dogst are you talking about, you bastard? Obviously you. Do you believe that it's reasonable to write our wish that didn't come true as the novel's conclusion? He looked at Han Soo-young's expression hardening up in an instant and continued on. Han Soo-young, no matter how hard we try, this story is different from the lives we had lived. You think I don't know that? Indeed, she also knew. Rather, she knew it better than anyone out there. She kept feeling this sense of separation with every sentence being written. No matter how precise the words she wrote were, no matter how painstakingly considered each expression she came up with was, it was still impossible to fully capture the history they remembered and to fully reproduce Kim Dak-ya, who used to live in this world within the story's pages. It's not as if I didn't give it a shot. I utilized the fable that I still remembered and tried to write the final episode just like how you did. However, in order to recreate Kim Dak-ya, the fables of the companions had gathered. One piece, two pieces, the sentences they remembered were piled up to become the imaginary Kim Dak-ya. You wish to hear what my boy was like when he was young. The Dak-ya Odyssey that I remember was. I'm telling you, Hyung really did that, for real. 1% of Kim Dak-ya, then 2%. Many people still remembered him, and Kim Dak-ya, as gathered in that manner, could potentially have ended up as the 99%. Even if Kim Dak-ya came back to us alive through the story we have crafted, do you truly believe that he will be the real Kim Dak-ya? That remaining 1% of Kim Dak-ya they couldn't remember. That Kim Dak-ya none of them could remember. Where would he be left behind in this universe then? Even before his soul scattered, Kim Dak-ya was the most ancient dream. Haven't you ever thought about how strange it was? Why didn't that fool ever dream of his own happiness? Han Soo-young shot back in near hysteria. Even if he is the most ancient dream, you can't just imagine a world the way you want. Most of the dreaming itself is done subconsciously. In that case, Kim Dak-ya's subconsciousness must have thought that this conclusion is the right one. An existence who had never imagined his own happiness. The Kim Dak-ya they knew was such a person. I also know that. I knew that Kim Dak-ya was such a person. Why do you think I started writing this story in the first place? Why I have. Drops of something wet were falling onto the backs of her feet. She wanted to say something, anything. To shout out, to grab hold onto Yu Young-hyuk's neck and choke him, shake him around. However, she couldn't. A voice mixed with indescribable fatigue entered her ears. In order to save someone. Han Soo-young raised her head at Yu Young-hyuk's voice fleeting past. Because of your story, I was able to survive until now. She glared at him with her reddened, tearful eyes. That's not something I wanted to hear from a bastard like you. The distant view of the industrial complex could be seen. That was their home, a place where every member of Kim Dok-ya company used to live, a place created by someone's seemingly impossible dream. Everyone now looked at it. Yu Sang-ah, holding the steering wheel, spoke. "So, that's what happened. Thank you for telling us the story, Jung-hyuk SSI." No one was crying. No one criticized Yu Jung-hyuk for his choice. This wasn't because their sorrow had been watered down. No, perhaps they had grown that much stronger. It wasn't just Yu Jung-hyuk alone. The companions regained enough strength to carry on with their remaining time by writing the story, then reading what had been written, all the while praying for a certain someone to read this story with them. The courage not to crumble even when the miracle they dreamed about evaporated right before their eyes. Now they could carry on knowing that some people were reading their story in the distant, far-flung other side of the universe. Yi Jai asked, "By the way, that novel, was it popular?" "It wasn't bad. You think Dok-ya Ajusis were enjoying it?" "Hey, you sooty bastard, have you seen the reincarnated Dok-ya Hyung? How was he?" As if they wanted to ask about everything they were dying to know until now, questions from the companions bombarded Yu Jung-hyuk next. He calmly replied, "I haven't seen any reincarnated Kim Dok-ya." However, he looked at Kim Dok-ya's statue brushing past the vehicle's window and continued on. "That fool definitely has read the story. I have a hunch. Dok-ya Ajasi must be really irritated about now, not being able to see the conclusion again." How would the Kim Dok-jas of other world lines remember this story's conclusion? Han Soo-young had no way of knowing. Coming up with a good conclusion was as difficult as making your ex accept the reason why you were breaking up with them. Wait, Dok-ya-sis from other world lines aren't going to invade this place, are they? That question prompted someone to whisper softly. "That might be nice." At the end of those words, deep silence descended on the companions. With great timing, Yu Sang-ah turned on the music right then. Notes from the instruments cascaded like falling raindrops. No one tried to look at each other's faces. That was the only courtesy they could exercise, at least for this moment. Within this weighty tenderness of the moment, Han Soo-young's thoughts drifted towards her novel still stored inside her notebook PC. The story without the last chapter. And now, no one would get to read about this novel's conclusion. But perhaps this world sometimes needed a story like that, she mused. How about we start living in one house again? Everyone raised their heads at someone's suggestion. A realization was gradually dawning on Han Soo-young. This was the story that Kim Dok-ya had given to them. The companions had regained their daily lives, and Yu Jung-hyuk came home too. This was the end of Kim Dok-ya Company's adventures. The conclusion that the person they all loved wished to see had finally been completed. Han Soo-young abruptly shifted her gaze over to Yu Jung-hyuk. "Okay, so, did you get to find out what your black square was?" "Not yet. However, at this point, I think it no longer matters whether I get to learn it or—" It was right at that moment, a strange sensation suddenly assaulted him. The sounds of tsu-chut-chut could be heard coming from somewhere. A noise wavered within their ears like a faint, distant song. The moment Yu Sang-ah turned the music off, Biyu's appearance as she sat in the front passenger seat suddenly changed. But Biyu had morphed back into the figure of a large furball. But that couldn't be possible. Before climbing into the car, she clearly said that the dissolution of the system had paralyzed her ability to shapeshift. Ugh. The voices coming from the empty air grew clearer and clearer. This was definitely sounds of fables busy telling their stories. What's going on? The system should still be broken, though. Han Soo-young stared at Yu Jung-hyuk, but he was looking back at her with the exact same eyes as hers. Fable, King of a Kingless World, has begun its storytelling once more. Groups of blinding letters were streaming past in the skis outside the vehicle's windows. They were from a fable the companions knew intimately. Yu Sang-ah. Yu Sang-ah hurriedly stepped on the accelerator. Meanwhile, Han Soo-young answered her phone loudly ringing inside her pocket. The call was from Aileen. Suyong SSI, right now it. Her voice couldn't be heard properly because of all the noises coming from the surroundings. Fable, predictive plagiarism, has begun its storytelling once more. Fables that had vanished without a trace along with the system's dissolution were now streaming towards somewhere while following after one another. Every single one of them were stories that had come to an end a long time ago. Is the story really over when the author stops writing it? Han Suyong looked up at the letters floating around in the skis. The letters that didn't hold any meaning when existing independently of each other were beginning to find their mates and groups one by one. Disconnected film theory. The companions soon drove into the complex and hurriedly jumped out of the limousine. Then, they began running. The fables they had acquired until now, the fables they had been telling until now, were brushing past their sides. No one knew what the conclusion to this story was. No matter how hard they tried, Kim Dok-ya would never come back. Even if they did recreate the 99% Kim Dok-ya, that missing 1% would always be there. But then, what if there was one existence in this entire world that could fill the last void of 1%? One existence, who used to possess the letters subconsciously scattered to the distant universe. Suyong SSI, over there. They could see Yisialhua's hospital in the distance. Fables leisurely streaming there guided them. Fables were gathering towards the hospital ward they were all intimately familiar with. Great Fable, Demon World Spring, has begun its storytelling once more. Han Suyong thought to herself. If an author didn't write it, then a story's conclusion couldn't be created. Great Fable, Torch that swallowed the myth, has begun its storytelling once more. Even if that was true, however, did that mean those reading the story couldn't imagine the conclusion on their own way? Han Suyong powerfully bit her lip. This story was created by her own hands, but another story she didn't know of was continuing on from the end of her story. What will happen if the moment of someone's imagination overtaking the author's sentences comes? As skills and stigma hadn't returned in full yet, Han Suyong ran out of breath rather quickly. Yu Yonghyuk supported her and kept running. Shin Yuseung, rushing up the stairs, tripped and fell. Other companions reached out and helped her up. Great Fable, Season of Light and Darkness, has begun its storytelling once more. Great Fable, Liberator of the Forgotten Ones, has begun its storytelling once more. The great fables they had acquired together were returning to them one by one. Even the unnamed last fable of Kim Dok-ya Company began singing about the emotion that no one dared to name. This desire, a wish, of those who went their separate ways a long time ago to become one once more. To grieve for someone else, to celebrate, to get angry, and to despair, and eventually wishing to become that someone else. Someone was sympathizing with their story. As her breathing grew heavier and heavier, Han Suyong kept thinking to herself over and over again. If this story can really save you, if you regain just a little of your memories and remember us just one more time, over there, then I'll keep writing the epilogue for you until the end of the time, for eternity. She reached before the hospital room's door, completely out of breath. Han Suyong was now standing before the very room that she came to visit every single day for the past 4 years. The rest of the companions running up the staircase one step behind were now looking at her. She looked back and began recalling the very last paragraph to the conclusion she didn't get to write. There are 3 ways to survive in a ruined world. She then heard Jiang Huiwen shouting out. Han Suyong. The other companions who heard the news belatedly, comrades who didn't accompany them to the East Sea, could be seen running over here through the building's window. I've forgotten a few by now, however, one thing for certain. Han Suyong's trembling hand grasped the door's handle. She was scared. What if there was nothing beyond this door? What if all this was nothing more than a sweet lie? She looked to her side and saw Yu Yonghyuk nodding his head. And that is, the you reading these words will get to survive. No matter what was waiting for them beyond this door, they were now ready to witness it. The door creaked noisily as it opened. Faint rays of sunlight entered through the wide-open window. The pages of the manuscript she spent the whole night revising scattered around in the wind. Letters scattered in a blinding fashion. The story she didn't get to complete, it was right there. The sentences she really wanted to write sometime, even if it was not now. While thinking about those sentences, Han Soo-young grinned like an idiot. This story is for just that one reader. Epilogue 5. The Eternity in Epilogue Complete, Fin. TL, here it is, the conclusion to the Omniscient reader's viewpoint. I'd like to thank you for sticking till the end of this epic journey through the proverbial thick and thin. Sing-Shong had written a separate author's afterwards, but it's unlikely that I'll get to translate it, unfortunately. The first half of it is in the form of a mock Q&A session, while the latter half is a thank you list of people who had donated and supported the author throughout the serialization of the novel in South Korea. I should say authors, because in the Q&A session, Sing-Shong reveals that it is neither he nor she, but a married couple, Shing and Shong. They both wrote the novel together, which apparently had been in development for many years, even before the couple's previous work, The World After the Fall. Incidentally, one of the couple's failed previous work is named How to Become a Famous Author, from CH 549. They recommend in a half-joking tone that you shouldn't seek that novel out. Once again, thank you for reading the Omni Reader. Your continued support means a lot to me. Till next time, thank you and goodbye.